Okay, let's call the meeting back to order. Okay, we're moving on to agenda item number 7B. During the break, there were some people that said that they're having a hard time hearing most of the commissioners, so when you talk, pull the microphone real close and speak up, because I guess we're having some difficulty hearing us. So 7B, draft fiscal year 2000 predator management plan.
Okay, Pete's gonna go ahead and go through the plan. Just as a general, the way that the committee, and this is going back to the August meeting, and the agenda item for the plan was not affected by the OML complaint. And the way we had written our agenda item in the August meeting was that we only had on the agenda approval of the projects that did not get approved in the previous meeting. But what we ended up doing was the committee on split votes decided to not fund some of the projects. That left additional funds that needed to be potentially reallocated to maybe some of the other projects. That was the desire of some of the members of the committee, but without having a DAG at my disposal, I had to make a call, and the way I read the agenda, I didn't feel comfortable going forward with reallocating to projects that were not on the agenda. And so that we left to the commission to do here. So, and I believe 60,000 is the number. But I do want to point out that everything is back on the table now that we're here at the commission meeting, and so we can bring back up any of the projects that the committee didn't approve and talk about those. I certainly would like to talk about them. And so, Pete, why don't you go ahead and just start walk us through the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete Bradley, Endow. I'm going to go straight to the budget table to sort of elucidate what Mike just talked about, and hopefully the colors will help with that. Is this thing on? So if you look at the projects from 18 to 34, the red ones were the ones that were approved at the Fallon meeting. And one partial approval was project 18 for 35. The rest of these were fully funded. At the August 20th committee meeting, what happened there can be characterized in all the green areas. So, for example, project 18, the committee recommended that $50,000 additional dollars were included to bring that to 85. And project 31 was recommended to be not funded. Project 34 was recommended not to be funded, these two here. And so minus those two, if you add this column up with the 35, what you have left after you also minus the approval in Fallon of the administrative costs, what you have left is 60,000 unobligated, and that would bring that total to 410. And if you'd like, Chairman McBeath, I'll either go to the green projects up in the text, or go wherever you guys want.
Yeah, let's, let's talk about, um, let's go ahead and go with the projects that the committee did approve, and then let's go to the projects that the committee did not approve, and then we'll see where we are and determine whether we need to look at the other projects after that. I think it's probably the best way to go.
Okay, upon discussions with Wildlife Services, they did recommend that the 35, well, they said the 35 would get them through a certain amount of time. I think it was September sometime, and they asked for an additional amount to total to 85 to make Project 18 complete to the end of fiscal 14. Project 21 was funded in Fallon. Project 2102 funded in Fallon. Project 22 funded in Fallon at 50. And Project 2214 funded at 40 in Fallon. And Project 25 funded at 25 in Fallon. Project 29 funded in Fallon at 25. And Project 30 funded in at the Fallon meeting at 25. And then we get to Project 31. It was recommended not to fund 31 at 25. And then one of the green projects that we looked at on the table after Project 18 was Project 32. And the recommendation was for 25, and well, the request was for 25, and the committee recommended that 15 be approved for this project, so 10,000 less than our request. And you want me to stop anywhere or just summarize all of them? Okay. And then the Project 33, Greater Sage Grouse Nesting Habitat Restoration, was the recommendation was, the request was for 50, and the committee did approve the project, but for half that amount, for 25,000. And then we get to Project 34, and the committee recommended against funding the Greater Sage Grouse Habitat Restoration in central Nevada, and that was in part due to us digging into the NEPA a little bit and realizing that we weren't as far along in NEPA as we had thought we were, and that most of the work, if we did any, would be on private land, and Chairman or Commissioner Bliss mentioned that a lot of that was already being conducted on private land, and so that was not recommended for moving forward. And then also to round it out, the committee on August 20th also recommended that Projects 6, the Desert Bighorn work in the Delamars, and Project 20 the California bighorn work in the Virginia mountains be defunded. They'd been going on for some time. And so that gets us back down to this table. And what you see there, again, is either funded, not funded in black, or recommended for funding, and with a $60,000 unobligated fund. And there's been some mention that that could even, depending on what happens today, could even be used as an emergency fund, or as something we can draw from if we need to, if it's not obligated to some other projects. That's all of it in a nutshell.
Okay, I think the easiest way to go would be to ask any of the commissioners, based on the recommendation of the committee for the items in green, whether anybody has any heartburn about any of those and wants to put those on the table, so we don't have to go through each one, or how do you want to do it?
I have a question, a few of them in green, and
Okay.
some of them in red that we may need to maybe augment to use up some of that 60. But the one question, the one in green that I have, is Project 32, Cougar Mule Deer Black Bear Diet Interaction. It was originally requested 25,000, and the number up here now is 15,000. And if you're doing a study and you start taking away too much money, how valid is your study in the end? If you, Director Walsley, I mean, if we take away that much money from that project, does it hurt the validity of what you're trying to accomplish in that project in the end?
Two things. Certainly, I mean, the answer's yes. I mean, it'd be either a smaller scale on the landscape or fewer animals. In both instances, you would expect a decrease in the value of the data. But secondly, I guess I would defer to Mr. Bradley and his specific project design and how that would specifically affect that design, because I don't know the project well enough to speak to it.
Okay.
And can I just add one thing with respect to projects 31 and 32, and correct me, Pete, if I'm wrong, these are all 3-to-1 match. And so it's not a matter of just reducing the amount through the predation management plan. It's that directly affects the match. And so the dollars that are going to that project are exponentially, affected by 3. Well, they're reduced by a factor of 3 because of the drop. So you can see here on the match, $25,000 is the seed money from the predation management plan. 75 is the PR match. Go ahead, Pete.
So, Mr. Chairman, Pete Bradley for the record, it would be a significant amount of money when you do add the match capability of the project, and these projects with the technology we have now comes some pretty steep costs when it comes to GPS satellite transmitters and some of the things that go with it. So it would reduce any amount you'd drop in the predator fee would reduce significantly the amount of collars on the ground, whether they be on black bear or cougar or mule deer. There's these proximity collars that we're planning on using as well that are a lot cheaper, but still show you how close the herds are to these carnivores, and it's boosting our ability to understand what's going on in the field exponentially. And the more callers we have out there, the better. To the director's point, the statistical significance of the data ramps up when you have more samples. And so I hope that answers your question.
Can you address that, Mr. Newton? Because we've gone over this, and I'm comfortable with where we're at, but we'll have our DAG.
The data that came out of the meeting, that 8-hour meeting, the illegal meeting.
I don't believe that portion was illegal. Mr. Newton, could you help us out here?
Well, first off, I don't believe there's been a finding regarding whether or not there was an open meeting law violation on that meeting. You've taken action to correct the part that was allegedly infirm, which I believe was separate and distinct from this particular section that you're discussing now. So I don't believe there's any taint, to use a poor term, on this particular section that you're worrying about or that you're discussing in regards to the open meeting law complaint that's currently being examined by our office.
Okay, so you're comfortable with us going forward?
I am.
So am I. Thank you. Getting back to where we just were, where I'm at on this project itself is when you start short funding something, I'm in a place that I'd either go zero on this project or fully fund it, because there's a reason they asked for the full amount, and that's what they've built their project around. You start shortchanging it, it changes their product, and we don't get what we're after, so you're wasting $15,000 potentially, and the matching dollars. So I'm either in or out on this type of a project, is what I'm saying. On this particular one, there's some of them that we could augment, and I believe that we could get more value out of it by the augmentation.
Along those same lines, with regard to Project 31, which the committee decided not to fund at all, I guess I have a question. And this really goes back to when on the commission a few years ago, we had one of the PhD biologists, I believe she was with California Fish and Game, come and speak to us with regard to the mountain lions. And when I spoke to her, when I pulled her aside and spoke to her, she basically made the comment that we're subject to challenge on our mountain lion management plan if all we're relying on is the data from dead cats, and that we better be putting collars on our cats. That was her blunt response. And so that's why I thought this was, a good study from the standpoint of because we are now getting these tools, these new tools, the satellite collars, that we will be getting some really good data on not only the cats, but their interaction with the bighorn sheep and the mule deer herds. And so my question is that if we don't fund, and this was a 3-to-1 match, if we don't fund it, if the seed money doesn't come from predation management, I really do think that we ought to be looking at this project. Where else can we, can this be a heritage? Can we get it from heritage, or are we going to try to find a way to do this project, or is that where we're going with it? I'm just curious, because I really, it has some connection. It was explained in the project that it has some connection to the interaction of the cats with multiple big game species, and coming up with strategies on how to best do predation management once we got the, once we got the data and understanding the interactions better. And so, but if we're not going to do that, I guess my question is how are we going to get it done? Are we going to try to get it done, and how?
Mr. Chairman, Pete Bradley. With the seed money, with the $3 fee money, and the PR match, we have a much greater likelihood of attracting NGOs like the Wildlife Conservation Society to improve the sample size, extend the length of the study, either or. But without the $3 fee, we would attempt to attract NGO support as well. We're just trying to get this on the ground.
Anybody have any questions? Commissioner Bliss. Sorry.
I have a comment on this particular one that Commissioner McBeath is talking about. And I was against this project. And the reason is I've been able in my life the last 23 years to follow mountain lions around quite a bit. And what I've learned by this is that mountain lions are opportunists. And I've seen where they've hunted around a pack rat nest for looks like 2 hours trying to find pack rat, and then all of a sudden something else will catch its eye and it'll go hunt that, whether it's a deer or an elk or a rabbit. It doesn't seem to matter to them, and whatever they want to kill, they will. And so I just have a hard time spending this money on something that I've been able to see personally on how a mountain lion reacts. No matter how many different species are there, he's going to hunt and kill whatever's available to him. It doesn't matter if it's a bull elk. I've seen little female lions kill bull elk. It's crazy how powerful and amazing these animals are. And just whatever is in front of them and whatever they want to kill, they will. And I just have a hard time spending this kind of money. I think it can be spent somewhere else. And we'll get more out of it.
And this issue really comes down to how is this agency going to be perceived as basing its decisions on the management of wildlife on what is in effect anecdotal understandings of whether it be sportsmen, former ADC contractors, wildlife services. Are we going to make our decisions based on anecdotal evidence and what our personal beliefs are, or are we going to seek out the best science and base our decisions on the science? Because if what I'm afraid of is that if we are called to basically defend our positions, if somebody challenges us on our mountain lion management plan and how we hunt mountain lions and how we, have seasons for mountain lions, are we going to be calling on sportsmen and outfitters and others to come forth with the evidence of how mountain lions act? Are we going to rest our decision making, and are we going to go to court with true science-based research as to what we have found? And with the technology that we have, we're opening up a whole new area to where we can get the best possible data to make our decisions. And that's why I want to go forward with a project like this, because it may only confirm exactly what Commissioner Bliss knows from his own personal experience and what Mr. Laughlin knows from his own personal experience. But guess what? It might open our eyes to something completely different. Or we learn something that we didn't know. And so that's why I'm looking at this and saying, we ought to be, seriously, putting an underpinning to what we're doing as far as our management of all of our game species, especially these mountain lions that really, I find it hard to believe with a cat that is as secretive as a mountain lion that we truly, really do understand exactly what they're doing. I really struggle with that, and so I think that there's nothing better to do but then put a collar on them and understand where they're going and how they interact, because what this project does is we have collars on both these prey species and the cats, and these proximity collars get us to the kills as soon as possible so we can figure out what's going on. That's what's been explained, and that's why I think it's a good project. And with a 3-to-1 match, I really want to see it funded. I understand where we are with the predation management plan and the politics, and this is a research program, and it's not an on-the-ground predator control program. I get it. But we need to do this work somewhere, and I'm just hoping that, and I think the department's is going to make that, it's going to get done. But, that's why we do have in our predation policy now the ability to look at these kind of projects, and if we do feel that they're good projects, then I'd like to see them go forward. But I'm more concerned that they get done, whether it gets funded from this project, from this pool of money versus another pool of money. I'm okay, but I really do think with a 3-to-1 match, this was a good viable project. So.
I think it's important that, we had some fairly substantial discussions about all of these, and the votes were 3-2, 2-3. There was a lot. I think it's really important to point out that there was a lot of disagreement among the members of the committee, and I don't know if there may have been one vote that was 5-0, but I don't remember that, but I'm sure that there was somewhere. But I think it's important for the commission to understand as we're looking at this that there was some substantial division on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a couple things that I'd like to point out that happened at our committee meeting. And the first one being that when we started going through these projects, the department came through with some different proposals for funding. And like the two projects, 31 and 32, their recommendation was for 15,000 and for 15,000, not the original 25. And due to having our hands tied the way it was on the agenda, I know from my standpoint, I was having trouble because I was wanting to augment some of those other projects, and I would have maybe not supported some of the projects that I did, but since we couldn't touch those ones that had been passed at the commission meeting, we were stuck with that. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm urging the commissioners from my standpoint on the committee. We're seeing what's been recommended, but I'm good with, I trust each and every one of you members of the commission, all of you, to vote your conscience, vote what you think would be the best for this plan.
Any other comments from any of the other commissioners on the projects? So I think, I don't know, probably the best thing to do is to, because we don't know how many, if we want to revise the committee's recommendations, then we should do that first. And then And then then whatever's left over, then we have to decide whether we want to augment one of the other projects. So I think that's the first thing that needs to be done, is to decide whether we want to approve the recommendations of the committee.
Before we go to approving anything, we're going to public comment. Come on up, Mr. Laughlin.
Mike Laughlin for the record. I have a question. I asked this question several years ago when I was on the committee of Director Mayor, and I'll direct it to Director Wasley at the present time if I may. Why is it that the 3-in-1 match, which Chairman McBeath of the committee keeps referring to, can be done on a study, and the 3-in-1 match cannot be done on actual control? And I asked this question to Director Mayer, and he said, well, they can't do that. They won't allow that. The only thing that they allow the match for, the 3-to-1, is for a research project. So I'm going to ask this again today, for the sake of asking it twice. Why is it that the state of Utah has over $1 million program at the present time for animal damage control on a match? The same thing is going on here, only they're matching the control effort. And to verify that, you can ask Mark Jensen. He's concurs with the people that are the director of the agency. It almost looks like you're prioritizing research projects, which are very palatable. It's much easier to tell the public, we're going to study to see if bears are going to eat the lion's food or lions are going to eat the bear's food. That, everybody says that's really great. Well, you need to know about that. But if you say you're going to go out here and kill a bunch of coyotes out of deer in February, that doesn't sound very good. No matter how you put this, if you're going to kill one thing to benefit another thing, that's a completely different set of circumstances than when you get into these research projects. So I'm going to ask this question, Director Wasley. Can you match $3 money on a control effort, the 1-for-3 match? Yes or no?
Director Wasley?
It's not as simple as yes or no. For the benefit of those who don't know, this match money that we're talking about is generated from a federal excise tax and is divvied up to the states based on a formula that involves tag and license sales. So there are federal stipulations on how that money can be spent. And so it isn't as simple as saying, yes, it can be spent to control predators. It can be spent if there is a significant monitoring component to it. But that ultimately, the approval of that project is under the authorization of the Wildlife Restoration Program with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And for those funds, for those monies, we are required to develop a grant. That grant has to be approved and signed off, and those expenditures have to be specified. Utah, I believe, has been able to utilize some of their federal aid dollars for the purposes of controlling predators, but it has not been without a significant monitoring component. So whether you call it predator control or whether you call it research, it's on a continuum, and it involves both aspects of those two activities.
Thank you.
So what you're saying, if it's $1 million project, it might be 500,000 predator control, 500,000 associated research, so it's really not $1 million in predator control.
Correct, and ultimately it requires that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who is the funding agency on these, sign off on it. And there's variability in the interpretation of the federal laws that govern the expenditure of those dollars as well. So I imagine there's some regional variability that exists within those programs too.
Commissioner McNinch.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The Utah, I'm not so sure that that's not a state appropriation right out of their general fund.
Okay, where are we at, Mr. McBeath? Oh, more public comment. Dr. Moldy?
Mr. Chairman, Don Moldi-Reno. First of all, I want to thank Commissioner McBeath for what I regard as a profound philosophic statement that I've never heard before, phrased in that way in 35 years of coming to these meetings. To suggest that an agency should operate on the basis of science and data as compared to anecdotes and good old boy stories is remarkable, because it's been the latter in my experience for all these years. And I fully agree with him and compliment him on his insightfulness in putting that idea forward. And specifically with respect to the mountain lion, here's what I'd suggest. Washington State University, Professor Wilgus, I believe is his name, has produced some incredible mountain lion research in the last 12 or 14 years that has led to profound management changes in the state of Washington and perhaps elsewhere. For example, in eastern Washington, the Okanagan Valley area, one of the things that people observed at one point was there seemed to be a lot of juvenile mountain lions running around, and therefore it was assumed that the population had increased of mountain lions. Turned out, with some research, that the opposite was true, that the mountain lion population was in decline, and that the reason the juveniles were seen and visualized is because the resident lion, or lions, which defended their territory and kept juveniles out, had been killed. And that, in fact, the population was in decline and that the juvenile presence was explained in that manner. So this is something counterintuitive. Last legislative session, one of the legislators told me that mule deer populations had increased in this state in the last 10 years as a result of predator control. While I was telling him the numbers have been flat for 10 years. He wouldn't believe me. He believed that actually things had been happening in the other way, even though I had the data and he didn't. So at any rate, if you really want to get into this, why don't you invite Professor Wilgus down from Washington State sometime and have him tell you how mountain lion research has opened the eyes of him and his staff and the staff at Washington. You would learn some amazing things. Thank you for saying what you did.
Dr. Lynn.
Gerald Lent, for the record, from Nevada Hunter Association. Again, in accordance with the open meeting law, I want all my comments to be included in the minutes of this meeting and all the dissemination of the minutes. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I want to address the sportsmen's representatives on this body here. Why would you let anybody else make a motion on how to spend sportsmen's money? It's your dollars to spend. Only sportsmen have put dollars into the predator program. Neither the conservation rep, the anti-hunting rep, the cattle rep have put money into the program. Sportsmen should decide how their money is spent, nobody else. Yet you sportsmen let it happen. You let an anti-hunter make a motion on the predator plan to eliminate all these predator plans. Well, of course he's going to do that. Silence makes cowards out of the best of men. And you know who said that? Abe Lincoln. And that is absolutely true. Let's go to, I want to discuss one Project 18, okay? And on page 7, it says the cost-benefit ratio would not support continued expenditure of sportsmen's dollars, okay? So let's look at cost-benefit since you quoted it in Project 18. If you're doing cost-benefit analysis for predator programs, then you should do it for everything, including habitat, the sheep transplant program, etc. Everybody and every program should also be subject to that kind of analysis. If they, NDOW, are doing it for one program and basing their decisions on cost-benefit analysis, they shouldn't do it just for one program that they dislike. Let's look at examples. You commissioners should be able to understand this. What benefits do you get from moving sheep? A few more sheep tags? It doesn't pay for itself. A few extra tags. There's no cost benefit for moving sheep around, transplanting sheep. It's a loser, dollar-wise. Look at the money spent on habitat, and it hasn't produced any more deer in 10 years. It's a losing program. There's no cost benefit to it. $4.5 million on the habitat budget, and what have you got? And what a hypocrisy, the way NDOW uses cost-benefit analysis. And you commissioners should be able to see through this. If you're gonna do it on one predator plan, you should do it on every one of their plans. And the reason they don't wanna do Project Teen is because it makes them look bad. It was successful, and we had a commissioner say they doesn't believe the deer increased 76%. Well, if you have X number of deer 10 years ago and you have X number of deer by the department records, it doesn't take much of math scientists to figure out what percent increase in deer you have in that area. And it makes them look bad, the department look bad because it's so successful, Project Teen. And I was glad to see at least they extend it for another year. But if it's successful and the deer goes up, let's extend it longer than that. Let's not put a timetable on it. But if it makes the department look bad, they don't want to continue it. But, you know, you commissioners should know, look through the hypocrisy. If they're saying cost benefit, then you should make them do it on all of their programs. Thank you.
Come on up, Rex.
Rex Flowers, Washoe County. We missed something in the memo someplace because we thought we were still sitting at 35,000. We did not understand. In our stuff, it's not highlighted in green or red. It's just kind of blurred. We did not understand that these highlighted items were items that the committee had approved. So we were under the assumption we only had 35,000 going to Project 18, and we were making a recommendation that out of the unallocated funds, 40,000 be added to Project 22 for the statewide part of this, so that we'd have those emergency funds available if and when needed. So that's my report from the commission. On a personal note, I would like to see you move forward on Project 33. That's a bi-state sage grouse, and I'd like to see you allocate $25,000 there to bring that up to where it was. You have 25 going. I'd like to see it increase to 50 on a personal note because of the subspecies that it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Or back to Mr. McBeath. How do you want to go forward?
I guess I want to come back to the projects in green, and maybe we just go one at a time. Let me start with Project 18. The committee recommended going ahead and fully funding Project 18. We had previously approved through the end of September, I believe, the 35,000, and so now we are, the committee recommended, again on a split vote, to go ahead and finish out Project 18. I guess the easiest way to do this is to just, I don't know if you want to do a motion on each project?
Commissioner Drew?
Move to approve the committee's recommendation to add $50,000 to Project 18.
Motion and second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that motion? Say, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye. Nay, sorry.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. At the risk of muddying the waters a little bit, at the Fallon meeting, there was some discussion relative to the cancellation of project number 6, and the discussion suggested that the activities under Project 6 be covered under Project 22. There's currently an employee with Wildlife Services, a full-time employee that's out there on the ground currently conducting activities. There's already been costs incurred under Project 6. Project 6, as a formal standalone project, has been recommended for cancellation. We have already incurred some costs. That project was funded at a level of 82,000, I believe, last year, or at least the recommendation for this year was 82,000. Some of the discussion at Fallon indicated that those, at least a portion of the activities associated with Project 6 should be covered under Project 22, which currently would be inadequate at the level that it is to absorb all those costs, along with the other activities expected of Project 22.
And the committee did, although it did approve the cancellation of Project 6 and the Delamars, it was with the understanding that it would be, any necessary work would be covered by Project 22. And so what you're saying is that there may not be enough money in Project 22. Okay.
Commissioner Drew?
Yeah, just a question on that. To me, it would seem cleaner just to program some of the money in Project 6 to cover at least portions of the cost. So one of the questions I would have is how much do we have outstanding? And does it make more sense just to program that into 6 than it does back into 22?
I guess we would have to probably ask Mr. Jensen if he knows at this point, but I don't know that we've given him the opportunity to determine that and prepare to answer that question at this point in time. He might have some idea. The discussion in Fallon, the idea is that we were moving in a direction that would allow us to have a more simplified approach to these projects, where we would have a broader, overarching mammal control project, avian control project, and that it would allow the commission, the department, and Wildlife Services all more flexibility to work under that umbrella, where currently if one project is overexpended, to take money from another project that's underexpended maybe raises some eyebrows. So that was, I'm just reminding you of the discussion that as it occurred in Fallon.
Okay. So we're still unclear on the 22 and 6 issue, but Commissioner McBeath started going through the greens. I want to continue through the greens. Let's get out the committee recommendations, then we can get to the bottom of the 60,000 and see where we can plug that in up above. The committee had recommended Project 31 as cancellation. Is there anything different from the commission, or any comments on that from the commission? Commissioner Drew.
Move to approve the committee's recommendation to cancel Project 31.
We have a motion? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I guess the only discussion I'd have is I get where Commissioner McBeath is coming with his comments, but this is more focused as a diet study, which can eat up a lot of bucks when you're doing a diet study, and it's not a distribution study, which I think you're more looking at, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I think maybe we should reformulate that and come back with a better format if that's truly the goal in the next round.
And that was the purpose of my questions. I would hate to see this, where you're going with this particular study, drop because of this. I was glad to hear that it looks like you're going to find a way to get it done.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I guess the only thing I want to say is that the department had recommended approving that. They dropped it from 25 to 15, just like they did with Project 32. And so I'm probably not going to be going along with this motion. I would rather go with the department's recommendation of $15,000 as a compromise. But anyway, it doesn't look like that's where it's going.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing Commissioner Lane.
I would agree with Commissioner McBeath on that as well. I'm going to vote nay on this.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
We have 2 nays.
3.
Okay, I'm sorry. McNinch, McBeath, and Lane, nay. Okay, Project 32, Mule Deer Black Bear Diet Interaction.
Move to approve the committee's recommendation of 15,000.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I have a question. I'm sitting here thinking about hanging collars on deer, bears, lions in that part of the state. And right now, we have a lot of mule deer running around with collars in northwestern Nevada. We have a whole ton of lions running around with collars, and we have a lot of bears running around with collars. Can we use some of the existing collars that are already hung on existing animals and maybe migrate your project a little bit to come up with the same type of study? I mean, how many deer did we collar around Douglas County and Washoe County? And I mean, how many lions are collared with the university study? And I'm just thinking about how many collars we have running around there. And are you looking at those in conjunction with your project? Or are we looking at that's where I'm struggling. I'm leaning towards 0 on this project if I'm going anywhere.
Mr. Chairman, Pete Bradley for the, Pete Bradley for the record. These are different questions that we were looking to answer. Also, there's a shelf life on the units that are currently out, and we weren't planning on overlapping in the study area. Again, the questions we were asking are different, and the technology is different with the proximity collars, and these other studies are winding down, and we feel it's an appropriate use of this funding, and we hope you seriously consider it.
Commissioner Bliss.
I voted against this project in the Predator Committee meeting, the prior one. And on the same basis that Commissioner, Chairman Robb just stated, I felt that we may be able to utilize some of the data that we've already collected from the collars that are on the deer and the lions and the bears in the area. And I felt that some of these dollars could be better spent in some of the projects that were already pre-approved in the August meeting. So I won't be able to support the motion.
Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify, it was my understanding that that 15,000 was the department recommendation. Am I incorrect in that thinking?
Revised.
It was revised,
It
yes.
was revised, so that is their recommendations, 15. Okay.
Commissioner Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I voted at the committee meeting to support this project because as we were going down through these projects, I was under the impression that we could go back and look through to augment some of these other projects. And then as we went further through the process and we got down to the end, I was counting on having some money to transfer, and that could not happen. So I think I've changed my mind on that project and from my committee vote, and I'm looking at I'm leaning toward funding it at 0.
Any other commission comments?
Call for the question.
I'll call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Aye. Okay, the opposed is Bliss, Yes.
Voting 15.
So the
To approve
motion we're voting on
15,000.
is the committee recommendation to program 15,000.
Okay, against is Young, Morai, Robb, Bliss. So motion passes 5-4. We haven't had one of those votes in a while. Okay, project 33.
Move to approve project 33 as proposed by, or recommended, excuse me, by the committee for 25,000.
I didn't.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Commissioner Bliss?
I know we've just approved the first reading of policy 23, and that the final will be approved at a later date. But in that, it does require, you know, the NEPA documentation to be reported, shown, and proven that it is there. And that's kind of been my concerns all along with this. I know Mr. Bradley has said that in project 34 that the NEPA wasn't done and would not be done for this time. But I've never seen any documentation, actual documentation that says that this project is ready to go and we could do it, and I don't know enough about it to do that. Also, in the policy, and I know it's not a valid policy right now because it hasn't been approved, but it does say that we will areas that have ongoing projects will have a priority, or projects that were done would be a priority to fund additional, you know, the predator stuff into. And I'm really struggling because I believe that project 2214, that $40,000 is not near enough money to get the benefit that we're looking for. And I think that that money would be better spent in 2214 than here, because in 2214, there's been removal of a tremendous amount of feral horses. There's habitat projects that are being done, and I don't want to just go at the predator side of it halfway. I don't want to set it up for failure, and I believe that we need more money in that particular project. And myself, I'd rather not fund 33 and actually move that money to 22-14.
Okay, any further discussion? Commissioner Drew?
Yeah, my only thought on approving project 33 is it's somewhat time sensitive in that the bi-state sage grouse is up for a listing decision much sooner. There's an action plan in place that identifies conifer encroachment as one of the main action items. I think it fits in, even though we maybe not have predator projects on the ground in there. It would fit in with predators from the standpoint that there's a lot of leks, or some of the leks that are in the area are either on private or near private ground. So even if NEPA is not cleared, I think that money could go towards private that NDF is already working. So I think even though we may not have a predator project per se in that area, I think it's going to help with some of the predator issues around the leks. And it fits right into the action plan. And so that's why I'm kind of comfortable with going this way on it, at least for this year.
Commissioner Moray?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I still have concerns with what was brought up about the NEPA. I've already voiced my concerns with going with habitat projects with this funding, because there are other sources of funding to address the habitat projects. So I although I do believe in all habitat projects, I don't think I can support funding this project with these funds.
Commissioner Bliss?
I would feel, I think it would make a good project if you could get the funding from upland game stamp money. And then if you were to use money out of this fund to do the on-the-ground predator work in conjunction with all the other works getting done, I think we would actually be able to do more good in that area than just providing the funding to do the habitat work out of the predator account. I'd rather see the habitat part of it come out of upland game stamp or something else, and then come in and do predation work in the same area out of the predator account. And I would feel a lot more comfortable going at it that way than what we have right here.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Young, Moore, aye. Bliss? Nay. Okay. Can we get back to the other screen so I know where I'm going? Up a little bit. Okay, project 34, the committee had recommended cancellation.
So I would make a motion to approve the committee's recommendation to cancel project 34 for this year.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Commissioner McBeath?
Yeah, and I just want to, the reason is this was not NEPA ready. And so I think the committee is realizing that this project may come back as a project for next year, once they get their NEPA clearances and everything. So it's not like in other words, the reason for not recommending it this time is because of the lack of a NEPA clearance.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of keeping the cancellation signify by saying aye. Aye. All those
Aye.
opposed? Okay, motion passed unanimous. Now we have the reallocation of $60,000. Does anybody want to take a stab at how we were going to divvy that up, or Commissioner Drew?
I guess my question to both Director Wasley and maybe Director Jensen is that if we program that money into Project 22, does that give us the latitude that we need to do what we need to do? And I'm seeing a thumbs up from the back of the room, and I'm seeing a head nod at the front of the room. So I'll give this a try, and we'll see where it goes. I'd make a motion to program the unobligated balance of $60,000 to Project 22 for this year, in addition to the 50 that's already been approved.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Bliss?
Just one question. Would there be enough funding in there to cover the Project 6 basically? And if needed, more money that we could augment 2214? Or is that going to eat up all the money that's there?
Yeah, it would all depend on the amount of money that we spend on other projects in Project 22, other issues. And I think that has varied annually. Project 22 has kind of been a project that we've been able to utilize to be more responsive to newly identified threats on the landscape. And I don't know, perhaps Mr. Bradley knows what we expended in that last year, but I can tell you just quick math. If there were 60,000, the unobligated was reallocated to Project 22, that would be 110,000. The expected budget from Project 6 is 82. That would be a balance of 28,000. Not knowing what we spent on Project 22 last year, it could be more, could be less, and not knowing what we're going to spend in that this year. My guess is if there were unexpended dollars in Project 22, that we would be able to utilize them in 2214 just because of the relatedness of the projects.
Any further, Commissioner McNinch? Oh, Mr. Bradley, and then we'll go to Mr. McNinch.
I've got the numbers here. For the record, Pete Bradley, Project 22 last year spent $10,731. They were authorized to spend $80,000.
So ostensibly, that would give you, if we spent the same amount, it would give you 18,000 or just shy of 18,000 that could be utilized to augment the 2214 or other projects.
Commissioner Bliss.
I guess one of the reasons I have this concern is the way all this happened and the way Project 2214 was passed in the August meeting. We really didn't get to make comments at the meeting on the project itself. And if you read through the project, I mean, there's a lot of things that need to be done in there as far as rodent counts and all this stuff, and that I don't know if that was all that necessary, but if that's a requirement of the way this is written, you're gonna chew up the money that you got, $40,000 here, and you're gonna spend that money, and you're not gonna really be able to show, in my opinion, the benefit of what the predation work will be able to do. So I guess it just, I don't know.
Commissioner McGinnis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, you know, I'm gonna be, I am gonna support the motion, but the thing that kind of sticks in my mind, and right now there's trust developing between the department and the commission again, and so things, you know, this has got a high probability and a very good potential to work. But at some point, had this been 5 years ago, 6 years ago, you know, that might not have been the case. And I think it's touching a little bit on what Chad's suggesting, and that's the concept of having that discretion. And like I said, it's not out of lack of trust for the department, but from a policy standpoint, there might be, with our new policy that we're putting in place, you know, there's this providing guidance, and that's going to be a leg that's missing as part of this plan. And if these are the directions we're going to go, then I think we need to be think about that and how it folds into our new policy that we're considering, so that can be a consideration as part of that. That we recognize that could happen on occasion. I think it's important.
And when it comes to providing guidance to the department, I think 22 is providing guidance. It's telling the department when you see a problem that we haven't painted them into a corner that they can't be reactionary when the reaction is required. So maybe that's the guidance we're giving them, is to be reactionary sometimes and not paint them into a corner.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if I can articulate it, but there was a lot of money leaving the predator stuff going to places where the department was basically out of the loop, and it was using these types of models to facilitate that, in my opinion. And you know, that's not a reflection of the department, that's a reflection of the commission that was in place.
But I believe with the policy that we haven't adopted yet, there will be reporting requirements that come back to us to see how that money was spent, that will give us some idea where if it worked. Hopefully we have the checks and balances with everything we're trying to get to. Commissioner Morai.
I have a question for Mr. Bradley. I didn't really understand your answer of 18,000. This is what was expended last year for the statewide, for Project 22.
Project 22, $10,731 last year, but they were authorized to spend 80,000.
I guess my question is, where did the other money go?
It's in that blue number.
In the 526.
It doesn't go anywhere, it stays there, and it's available
Stays
subsequent years.
available.
It just wasn't spent.
I guess my next question is then, if there was 80,000 and only 10 of it was expended, what assurances do we have that it would be spent? That's why I hesitate to put money into that fund that wasn't spent when we have another project. This 2214 is kind of the direction, this project's kind of the direction that we're trying to go with this control money now, when it will enhance a habitat project also. And I guess I'm a little reluctant to leave the funding at 40 for that project on 2214 if it's not gonna be a sufficient amount to complete that project.
I believe Mark Jensen might be able to clear some of this up and we can get to a vote.
Again, Mark Jensen for the record, State Director. Again, last year, there was a certain amount of funds that were available, but again, that, by the time that was approved last year, we'd missed all the flying. So it was so late in the year that we weren't just gonna waste that money. So we had missed our opportunity to go fly with those dollars, so that's why it wasn't spent. Again, if the money isn't spent, it rolls over, and here we have the availability to spend it now. But again, it wasn't spent for any other reason than we were too late.
Director
Mark?
Jensen, can I ask a question while you're at the microphone as you walk away? Are you comfortable the way the motion reads that you'll be able to do what needs to be done? Does this give you the flexibility you need, or do you need more clear direction in terms of maybe splitting that out into sub-project 2214 from your standpoint?
I'm comfortable with it as long as Director Wasley's comfortable with it and the commission's comfortable with it. I'm good with it.
Okay, and then I guess the only other comment that I would have for myself personally is as we move forward, kind of a new way of doing business, part of the accountability to me will be to see how this all works with the agencies and the commission and the latitude as to how we move forward in the future. I mean, if you guys can demonstrate that this is gonna work and we can allow some of that flexibility and professional judgment, I'm gonna be a lot higher on doing that sort of thing in the future. So I think that gets a little bit to what Commissioner McNinch has mentioned, in that I'm willing to put some good faith into both agencies that we're gonna be able to make this work. So that's kind of where I'm going with providing the latitude to everyone.
Commissioner McBeath.
I certainly respect Chad's concerns about the project in his backyard, and you know, he probably understands what's going on there. And I'll be honest with you, I could be very critical of the way this project 2214 has been written. First of all, it's much better than what I've seen in the past, but there's still a lot of gaps in my mind, and I could sit here and reel off some of the concerns, what's lacking from this project description that I'm reading. But it's really premature because we've only now just put our policy in, and so I would, you know, I'd be making, you know, criticisms based on not giving, you know, Endow and everybody involved the opportunity to, you know, fully implement the policy. And so I am more apt to support the money going to the overall Project 22 than to pigeonhole it into 2214, because to be quite honest, I'm not there yet on any aspect of the project, because unfortunately at the meeting we approved it, we didn't get the policy done, and for some reason I didn't think that anything was going to go forward, and then all of a sudden we had on the table that we were going to approve these projects, and I hadn't really spent a lot of time looking at them. And so now that I've looked at it, I would have asked a lot more questions, and so I'm okay with going what was approved. I mean, it's water under the bridge for me on what was approved at 40, but I would rather see the money just go in and be more flexible to be able to spend it where we need to. And if the department and Wildlife Services determines it needs to go to 2214, then that's great. But otherwise, it's available to do whatever else is determined to be a priority.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, everybody's still clear on the motion? We've had a lot of discussion since the motion. Everybody's still clear on the call for the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay? Okay, we have one nay. Commissioner Lane. 8-1. Okay, do we have anything outstanding on this thing now? Mr. Bradley?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just a reminder, Project 6, Project 20 were canceled by the committee, but not I don't believe unless I missed something. But not the commission.
6 and 20? Well, if they weren't funded, they were basically canceled and we're out of money. Okay.
And actually, it was canceling with the idea that if there was anything needed, I think the committee's recommendation, excuse me, sorry. The committee's recommendation was that we cancel those, but that if there was necessary work, if there was work that was necessary, that it be funded through Project 22 on both of those.
All right. Commissioner Drew.
Just to be clear and cover ourselves in, I would move that we take the committee's recommendation, or adopt the committee's recommendation to cancel Project 6 and Project 20.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion passed unanimous. Anything else outstanding? Seeing none, we'll close that agenda item and move on to agenda item number 12. Proposed Trail Cam Commission General Regulation. Chief Game Warden Robb Buonamici. While Robb is coming up, we do have a meeting that was scheduled to start 40 minutes ago, and we have not started the tag allocation committee meeting, but we will start that meeting immediately preceding the close of this meeting.
For the record, Robb Buonamici, Chief Game Warden. What the item 12 is it's a draft regulation that we drafted based on prior commission meeting discussions regarding trail cameras. This has not been submitted to LCB. It's just a draft, an idea on paper for everybody to look at and comment on. And I'll just go through it in a nutshell and hit the highlights. Basically, it precludes a person from utilizing a trail camera for the purpose of hunting big game beginning 30 days prior to the opening of the season in that management unit. And then under Section 2A, it just defines basically the trail camera, including without limitation any device that is used for photographing or filming that captures images or videos using heat or motion detector to trigger the camera. Then we have a preclusion, any other device that is used for photography or filming that captures images or video not held and manually operated by a person. So that allows people to take photos of wildlife while they're out there. Section 3 exempts mountain lion as one of the big game seasons, so it wouldn't apply to the mountain lion season. And then Section 4 just has some elements of the crime, so to speak, for evidence of an act constituting a violation of this section, and goes through those. And then provisions of this section do not apply to, and it's got some exclusions, a person who is acting within the scope of his or her official duties and who is an employee or authorized agent of this state, an employee of a municipal or county government of this state, or an employee of a federal government. And then under B, it's got a landowner exemption, is a landowner and utilizing a trail camera for purposes of livestock protection. So that's kind of what we came up with as a starting point. Heard comments, the most controversial so far that I've heard is regarding the 30-day period prior to the season, whether it should just coincide with the beginning of the season. And of course, there's people on both sides of the issue as far as we don't need the regulation, we need the regulation. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Commissioner Young?
Rob, did you consider, I saw the position statement by Nevada Bighorns Unlimited, and did you consider the point that they made about a group such as there that obviously spends a lot of money and effort on guzzlers and water holes, having an exception for them, or having a permit for somebody, for a group such as that, issued by your department to go ahead and utilize a trail cam under only those circumstances?
Yeah, for the record, Robb Buonamici, we had those discussions already, and this is specific to for purposes of hunting. But I think where they're coming from is they'd like a little extra insurance, so to speak, that they indeed are exempt for those purposes and that's no problem if we come up with some language there. Right. Right. Yeah, and we're not opposed to that at all.
Commissioner Drew?
Rob, with the way in terms of having so many, I guess, big game hunt seasons and different units and things, would it make any sense to simply say August 1st to December 31st and just clean it up and take Section 3 out? Because a lot of the comments I've gotten specific to this has been kind of those two items. So am I reading that wrong if we just made it date specific, that we could take Section 3 completely out?
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. That's an option that's available.
Commissioner Bliss?
That is that section is kind of where I'm struggling with it personally, and like I say, half the people you talk to, like Rob said, want to do away with it completely, and half, don't want to do anything with it. And it kind of shows in the CAB reports, they're basically split right down the middle, with one county making a suggestion and then another county saying they need more information. And I mean, it shows you how split it is, and it's not just with the counties, it's everybody I talk to that's not even on a county advisory board. And kind of along the 30 days prior to any season, I wasn't on the commission or anything at the time when the season dates were set a couple years ago or last year. When is the heritage tag season start for next year? Because didn't those dates change and that's supposed to be earlier and go later?
Like on California Bighorn sheep, they went earlier.
Because I'm not sure what the date is. I don't know if anyone really knows, but
So that's, I think, what Commissioner Drew's suggestion of making a specific date, the date that Commissioner Drew?
Yeah,
Marie, am I mistaken to say that what we approved for Heritage was July 1? Maybe she's looking, or she didn't hear me. Maureen?
Pardon me, I'm sorry.
Do you recall what we did for Heritage seasons? The opening date, was that July 1, if I remember correctly?
I could look real quick for you.
Please.
For next year. Any other comments from the commission? Commissioner McBeath?
I agree with Commissioner Bliss that there was quite a split of the way sportsmen feel, and I had some interesting discussions with some sportsmen, and not all of them fully informed, and spoke to one group, father-son, who used trail cameras, and so I was asking them, what they thought about this proposed regulation, and they told me how they use them, and they ultimately admitted that they've never successfully, killed anything that they've got on any of their trail cameras, but that they do use them, and they enjoyed it. And then I started asking them, I said, well, are you aware that there are people that have technology associated with these cameras that are now uploading them into either their camps or their homes and are able to respond to that data, virtually immediately. And would that change your mind? And there was, they thought about it and they said, you know what? We'd actually give up the use of trail cameras because we think that's foul. And so I thought that was an interesting, you have actually people that are using trail cameras right now, and when they understand how they can be abused, they reacted, that they didn't, they think they would support that regulation. The other aspect, and I really do feel because of the technology base that we already have a law in place that kind of sets the policy, and that is our, what we have on aircraft already, on flying. I think this really is very similar policy-wise to that. And I also think that the suggestion of the Lincoln County Advisory Board to not allow trail cameras at any time of the year within 200 feet of any kind of a water source is also a very good idea. And that is also embodied in our statutes in that we don't allow camping within I think it's a quarter mile. That would be 440 feet or some
440 yards.
440 yards, excuse me, yeah, so 1,200 feet. So I'm okay with syncing up the distance or changing the distance or whatever, but I thought that was a really good idea because a lot of the comments that we've received is that having 15 trail cameras on a single water source, and it's really a more problematic issue the further south and central you get in Nevada, when you get to these drier areas that, that you have game that are going in. I mean, they're literally tied to these water sources, and if these cameras truly are, impacting them, then we ought to, move the trail cameras away from the water sources. And I realize it makes it a little bit more difficult, for the trail camera users, but they'll have to put their trail cameras on the trails coming in as opposed to actually on the water source, concentrate them on the water source. So I personally thought that was a good idea.
Before I let you go, Mr. Bush, I'm going to reference a couple emails and letters I got from people concerning this that conflict what my thought process is, because I, for one, don't really like them. But then Andy Stenson, who is probably one of the best volunteers the state currently has, and he does a lot, sent me a letter, and he sent me photos of sheep on my dad's guzzler. There's a guzzler named after my dad, and I know he did that trying to pull my heartstrings because it was someplace very special to me, and it made me think different. I mean, if everybody was Andy Stenson and was using it for the reasons that Andy uses them, we wouldn't be having this discussion. So when I look at the possibility of taking something like that away from Andy, I have problems with that. But then I had another gentleman send me an email saying how much he liked trail cams, and he referenced in his email that he was able to send that email to me because of new modern technology. He was sitting in elk camp sending me that email. Well, all of us know we used to really love hunting because it was a way to get away from our cell phones and normal life, and now you go out hunting and your cell phone follows you because we have more and more coverage every place we go. And his argument of I'm sitting in elk camp and technology is great basically was one of the things I don't like is that creep in technology and the increased areas that cell phones work and the ability to abuse the communication networks we have, and they're expanding rapidly. So I've got 2 emails from 2 different people that have me going 2 total different directions. But I do see them as a problem going forward. And if we don't get our hands around the problem is going to continue to get worse, and it's going to be harder to tackle in the future. It's going to be more unpalatable to tackle, and it's just, this is a monster that's going to get away from us. Commissioner McBeath.
And I just want to make sure that you understand that the technology, if somebody is, selling, locations of animals on eBay for thousands and thousands of dollars, they're not going to have to wait for cell phone coverage. They're going to have a satellite-based cell phone and they're gonna be able to download it no matter where they are. And, you know, I have one, I carry it for safety reasons, they're expensive, but if I'm making a lot of money from the data that I'm getting, then I'm gonna have one. So, I just want everybody to be aware that the technology to immediately do it, no matter where they are, is here right now. And it doesn't require coverage, unless, you know, we lose some satellites.
Commissioner Bliss.
I'd just like to touch on the item that Commissioner McBeath brought up about moving the cameras 400 feet from a spring or something like that. I actually think that would be worse, because what you're gonna have is you're gonna go 400 feet from a water source, and you're gonna have all these big wings built where people are gonna cut trees down, or they're gonna build a big wing and force animals to walk through a certain place so they can get the picture of them. I can see it happening right now. I think if it's just at the water source, you're gonna eliminate all these different, people are gonna create a highway for them. And that's the other side of that deal. On the other deal, the remote camera stuff that you're talking about, I totally disagree with that. I am pro camera. I like to use cameras. I take my kids, they're excited to go look at the wildlife, and it's not for hunting. I mean, I put cameras in areas I don't have tags just so I can take my kids and we can go maybe get a picture of a lion or a bobcat or fox. It don't matter, you know. It's something that we enjoy to do. I've also sat out here in the audience for a lot of years and sat there and thought, and everyone says, we need to provide more opportunity. We got to get more people into the mountains. We got to, you know, figure out a way to keep this going. And now we have a deal where people are using cameras. They're going in the mountains a lot more. They're buying gas. They're going camping. They're going to look at all this stuff. And now we want to restrict it. Now, I totally understand during a hunting season, and I agree with not using them during a hunting season. Like I say, my biggest concern really is the remote cameras and the time period that you have to stop using them.
Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman.
Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've received more emails in support of not going further with trail cam regulation than I have to regulating it. And like I said, at prior meetings, I'm kind of right in the middle on that. I don't really have an opinion so much on that. I have a trail cam, like I said before, I don't use it for that purpose, but just because I own a hunting license, if I used it for that purpose, then it becomes to look at wildlife, maybe not even necessarily for the use of hunting, but that takes that privilege away from me, even though I'm not using it for what we're discussing here, of selling the pictures and everything else that goes along with it. So, I don't know, I'd like to see a little bit more on it and some more conversation, because I mean, right now, I've got two that say don't do it. The cabs are all over the place with it. So, I'd like to see a little more on it.
Anybody else? Let's see.
And just to clarify the water hole situation, it's 100 yards from a water hole that camping's prohibited.
Regulation is
Yes.
100 yards?
100 yards.
Yeah, my suggestion is if we're gonna go that way, I'd sync it up. 300 instead of 200.
And if we went with 100 yards, I agree with that, but I think we would need to incorporate some type of language that said 100 yards, and you cannot funnel wildlife, and you can't build barriers or funnel wildlife to make your camera work. I mean, if we put a border on it, you know that they're going to be trying to funnel the wildlife, so we got to add something there. Anybody else? Commissioner McNinch.
So along those lines, aren't there provisions that talk about, for lack of a better term, destruction of habitat? aren't there some general, I mean, aren't there things out there that might address something that's a little broader than, ripping a piece of dead sagebrush out of the ground for a fire versus chopping down trees and, building funnels?
For the record, Rob Buonamici, those are usually the land management agency's regulations with regards to the destruction of habitat on their property. So that's what, we'd have to enforce there. And on the flip side of it, depending how much vegetation was disturbed or pulled out or moved, it might be a little difficult to get a prosecution in court. Somebody goes, and their defense is, Your Honor, there's sagebrush all over this state. I pulled out 3, sagebrush bushes. Why is that a crime? It's everywhere. Or pinyon juniper, and Dow's trying to eradicate them.
Mr. Young had his hand up first, so I'm gonna go to him first.
If I'm not mistaken, Rob, this regulation draft it's not pertinent to water holes. It's
No.
just general hunting with them during the hunting season, or using for the purposes of hunting during hunting season anywhere. And we're confining it to 30 days before hunting. We're not taking away, or wouldn't be taking away, rights of people to use them in any fashion outside hunting purposes and outside the hunting season. And I don't see the discussion pertaining to water holes so much. I understand what was said, but I think it's just a general non-use of them during the hunting season, correct?
Yeah, for the record, Rob Buonamici, what the elements of the crime are here that we would have to prove in court is, 1, they used a trail camera to photograph wildlife. So you have to have those 2 elements, trail camera for purposes of photographing wildlife, and then for the purpose of hunting. So we have to prove those. So if the desire is to kind of modify this language, one option might be with the season, specific dates, or leave out the heritage, leave out the mountain lion, make it specific to, which is going to be harder to enforce, but specific to the hunter having a tag in that unit. So if he wants to go take photographs in other units, as long as he's not doing it for the purpose of hunting, sharing it with another, his buddy that does have a tag in that unit, and so forth. So that's an option. Again, it kind of muddies the water a little bit from an enforcement standpoint, but it sends a message.
But what about the guy that doesn't have any hunting license whatsoever, that's simply putting a camera somewhere and selling them on Craigslist, the locations? So, I mean, this is not gonna be as easy to enforce as one might think and get it on in court, because, as Rob correctly pointed out, the elements of the crime are pretty specific, and it's to target totally unethical practices, not to prevent, the way I read it, legitimate use of trail cameras for other purposes.
Commissioner Lane.
I'm just going to build on what Commissioner Young said, because I'm not seeing anything on this that wouldn't allow their use for trapping visitation at this time, right? I mean, this is based on what Commissioner Young, we're just talking about hunting. That's it, period, end of story.
Yeah, for the
Commissioner
record, that is correct. This just pertains to hunting.
The BLM cited me for driving my truck off of the main road, pulling it up to park, and they asserted that I ran over 3 bushes. Actually, I had pulled up in an area that somebody had already pulled up, and 2 of those bushes were already run over. So I ran over bush, and I possibly could have run over 1 bush. And if you can imagine the shock that I had been cited for doing something that I have been doing for 42 years since I started driving, that I have constantly, always, you know, and if I'm going down a two-track road and I'm gonna hunt an area and I pull off, invariably, I'm gonna run over a bush. But if, I did the research, and you know, and if you destroy their resources, and they literally think that a bush is a resource, one bush, then, you know, that's the way they treat destruction of resources. Now, it may be just the mentality of the Las Vegas BLM office and being in a more urban area, that's their mindset versus maybe the BLM that are out in Ely. But it was shocking to me. Now, they ultimately dismissed the case. I took pictures, and I was prepared to show all of the, you know, all of the vehicle tracks that were going in to where I parked. They were going to have a difficult time making their case. And I was also going to challenge them on their interpretation of their own regulations with respect to how much resource damage I had done, especially when I go down a mile from where I parked and there's an off-road racetrack with 50 yards of total annihilation of everything down the path of that off-road race. And so, anyway, I just have to relay that story because, you know, chopping down trees and bushes and stuff, you know, that might get the attention of certain BLM, you know, offices.
Okay, anybody else have anything? All right, we'll take it to public comment. I think Mr. Wilson wants to go first.
For the record, Dennis Wilson, Nevada Bighorns Unlimited. I appreciate the comments from Commissioner Young and Commissioner Lane. Nevada Bighorns Unlimited's position on this, as you all received a copy, I believe, of our position statement, we use trail cameras all the time. We use them on guzzlers, and we use them during hunting season. Now, granted, they're not being used for hunting purposes. They're being used to monitor the guzzlers, monitor all the items that I outlined on our position statement. So our concern is if a regulation should come forth, we would like to have the consideration for conservation reasons that trail cameras be allowed to be posted at water sites and during hunting season for these reasons. Thank you.
For the record, Bill Halverson. I'm the current vice president of the Fraternity of the Desert Bighorn and co-partner with Nevada Bighorns Unlimited a lot on projects. We have 350 projects statewide in this state that provide water to wildlife. And we also here in Southern Nevada, 115 projects, and a lot of those have cameras on them. So we're concerned about this also. I didn't know there was a big issue regarding this. And for people that hunt lions, how do you regulate that? I've got one picture of a drinker with 4 lions drinking at the same time. So, I mean, how do you regulate that aspect of it, or the coyotes or things like that, and other birds and whatever? I think there needs to be some serious discussion about the type of language that's going to be used here to affect the conservationists and people that are out there providing these projects for animals, but also those type of animals that can be hunted year-round. I don't know how you're going to address that, but the hunting aspect of it is one thing, I guess, but you still have people that are going to be out there all the time monitoring these things and trying to see what's going on in the areas, things like that.
For the record, Mike Reese. I'm speaking on behalf of the coalition for the Southern Nevada Coalition for Wildlife. The Clark County CAB did not get to address this. This was another one of the items that wasn't addressed. So on behalf of a lot of the sportsmen here, I don't own trail cams. I've never used them, but we've had some discussions on some bullet points of the pros and cons. You go back 20 years, 10 years, there wasn't trail cams around. The way that people hunted is you leave camp in the morning, you go up on a ridge or whatever, and you kind of disperse everybody, and they come back that night and they talk about, what did you see? Well, I didn't see anything up there, but man, I saw a lot of tracks. Or, man, I saw a lot of deer over here. This is where we should be hunting. At the end of the day, after you pull all the layers off of the pros and cons of a trail cam, what a trail cam does is it tells you
yay or nay to hunt in that area. Doesn't pull the trigger. It doesn't, that's about all it really helps you with. It'll tell you the time, and you know the actual place that that animal was at. We see this as a law enforcement nightmare. I think that the Robb and his crew did as good a job as they could of drafting some regulation for this, of how you do it. It is a lot more complex than people think. A year ago, I stood right here at this podium and I asked about antler length on a questionnaire. What I was really going for is because to a sportsman, that's what they look at. Now, to biologists and NDOW on a questionnaire, we don't have a spread. But what is the trail cam doing for us? It's helping decipher that spread. Is that one that I do want to go hunt or not? Maybe all you ever get on that trail cam is small does. I mean, small bucks and stuff, or a bunch of does. You could accomplish somewhat what you want to do with the trail cam by going to a water hole, cleaning it off, come back the next day and look at the tracks. Okay? I'm going to itemize a couple bullet points here that what we've talked about for the trail cams. Does it affect the gene pool? I've asked that because if all you're pulling out of that herd is the so-called trophy bucks, then are they not mating? Has there been a significant decline or increase in the last 5 years, 10 years since trail cam started again? How has that affected our data? How has it affected the success rate? We still, to my knowledge, Director Wasley can talk better about this. I think we're sitting around between 42 to 48% success rate. Earlier today, I sat in this room and we're talking about cow elk. What can we do to increase the success rate? I don't know that anybody get any objections if you're using a trail cam as part of a tool to increase your take on the cow tags, maybe even the bull. I don't know that we're taking any more deer out every year because of trail cams. We set a quota. We set a quota that we're trying to get. And I think that we've been pretty close. We being the department has been pretty close over the last 5-10 years of getting that quota. Now, when I came on the Clark County Cab 5 years ago, the number one item, the first item that I brought to the first meeting, Commissioner McBeath was there and we talked about it, was the use of trail cams. What I was trying to do is get, at that time I knew, it's like cell phones. There's gonna be so many of them, we're gonna have to regulate this, guys. Let's be proactive and do it now. I tried to get it out on the table and talk about it. At the time, next state commission meeting, Mr. Buonamici came and talked about the pros and cons of it and, you know, how would you regulate it and stuff like that. But nothing was done, but it was starting the discussion. That's what we're doing here. Now, I see it as a nightmare. Commissioner Bliss, you've talked about, hey, you know, there's a lot of guys for and against. I think by the end of the day, ethically, I don't approve of them. But who doesn't like looking at pictures of some monster deer, bucks, sheep? And who doesn't like seeing, hey, there's a mountain lion that just took some sheep out. Here's your proof. That is information we need to have. If we start taking those off because, well, you have a hunting license, you can't use it, that's information we still need to have. What if a spouse doesn't hunt? It's the spouse's trail cam. Again, I see it as a nightmare for law enforcement. I hope the issue can correct itself. I don't see it, but I would like to see in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, what has it done to our data? Has it increased it? Has it had any effect other than a morality issue? I just wanted to bring these points out and bring them up, and there will probably be more discussion on this. Thank you for your time.
Part of what I'm thinking on the law enforcement nightmare is there's only so many people that break the law. If it's against the law, a lot of this will go away. I mean, it's going to be against the law for the people breaking the law, but I think a lot of it will subside because people adhere to laws. Go ahead.
Joe Krim, Persian Cab. At our cab meeting, we had voted to oppose the regulation because of the 30 days before the season started. That's the only thing we had to say about that. But I'm going to take my cab hat off now, put on my Joe Krim from the public hat now. I've read the regulation over and over. I know what Robb said, that it wasn't going to affect anybody who wasn't hunting. Well, you guys know that my son does a school project, and he uses cameras for that project. And over the last 2 years, he's taken thousands of pictures of wildlife. Well, it's as clear as mud in here anywhere that says that the general public can still take pictures and not be in trouble if it's during the hunting season, because that's when he does it, is during hunting season. I've read it. It's still clear as mud. I cannot see where it says that the public can do it, because he still uses trail cameras to do the school project. That's all. Thanks, guys.
Rex? Oh, Tom, Rex, and then Joe.
For the record, Tom Castanelli with Humboldt County. We supported this process, basically. We knew this is just going to be the start of this whole process, and we've got a lot of work to do on it, a lot of discussion on it. We look at it as it's no different than having an airplane with some of these modern cameras. And why did we stop flying of these areas? It's the exact same issues you have. If you can pick up on your cell phone that there's 350 bull at guzzler number 6, and you're sitting down there half a mile away or a mile away, you're actually using this. And I agree, and we agree with what Robb said. It's not going to stop everybody. It never does, but it's going to stop the majority of people, because the majority of sportsmen are ethical. And when you make a law, they will adhere by it, the majority. Now, there's going to be a few that don't, and it's going to be a nightmare for law enforcement, probably. But if we don't stop it now, what's technology going to be tomorrow? What are we going to be doing? We'll be using satellite. We'll be using Google Earth to go deer hunting. Because it's going to happen someday. They're going to be able to see what's down there. And I really think we need to look at the ethics and stand behind our sport. And thank you.
Rex, and then Joe.
Rex Flowers, Washoe County Cab. We made a motion that it is way too early to look at any sort of regulation, mock or otherwise. It seems that the last commission meeting, I remembered there was, the motion was to bring forward a mock regulation. There was also on, I believe on this same, from the same meeting, a notation that much of what was being discussed was anecdotal information. And I thought there was direction to the department to start reviewing and finding some of the answers, some of the true facts, as you may. We need to know what is the problem, where is the problem? That needs to be identified. This discussion, Jack, I believe you brought it up to him about the hearsay of all these cameras on water holes, and could they get some more information so that we weren't dealing with anecdotal information. So I think we've really put the cart before the horse on this situation. Other comments I've heard, these real-time cameras require cell service. Each camera would have to have its own cell service. So if somebody's doing this, do you know how expensive that is? I mean, we need to review. Are these cameras there? Are they being used? We need to see that foundation. One comment made at our cab by a member of the general public to a cab member who happens to be an outfitter is, are you next? Let's face it, if it's unethical to use trail cams because of the unfair advantage it gives one, Are our outfitters going to be the next thing to be outlawed? Because that gives an ethical advantage to a gentleman who has money? Thank you.
Joe?
Jim Kern, Churchill County Advisory Board. In this discussion at our meeting Monday, our board was completely, and the public was completely opposed to any regulation at this time to regulate the use of camcorders. No one could come up with any management implications for someone who wants to take pictures of wildlife with or without a tag. They see it no different than this board all of a sudden wanting to regulate, say, mojo duck decoys because it may, to some, be more unethical to use a motorized decoy than it is one that's not. I imagine if we could go back to about the 1946 commission minutes after World War I, and all of a sudden we had scopes, there was probably the same discussion that, God, what kind of technology do we have now? All of a sudden everybody's going to be having scopes in their rifles, and it's just going to decimate the deer herds. Well, look at what's happened even with rifle scopes now. We're looking at 1,200-yard shots. I personally think that's unethical, but there's no emphasis right now to outlaw it. And this is the way, really, in Churchill County, we felt about this regulation. It just, because several people in the county brought it to you, that to start regulating everybody in the state and activity that they enjoy has no impact on the wildlife. I don't think anyone can come up with a case where there was a Boone and Crockett animal harvested because of a camcorder. There's just no justification for enacting anything at this time.
Brad Johnston, Lyon County Cab, for the record. We passed a motion in support of this proposal, thought it was a reasonable compromise. And what it came down to us is, well, there may not be an identified problem right now. We think it's just an ethical call that the commission has to make. It's not really addressing a problem. It's whether or not you believe use of trail cams is consistent with principles of fair chase and that. And for that reason and the overall consideration, we thought this was kind of a reasonable compromise to limit it for hunting purposes. Side note, take off my cab hat. I do see that there at the bottom there is this express exemption for a landowner utilizing a trail cam for purposes of livestock protection. I think that exemption already exists because that would not be necessary for hunting big game purposes, but if there is going to be that exemption, we would certainly like to see it be for livestock or crop protection. And the reason I say that, as someone who works on a vegetable farm or for a vegetable farm, the pressures we have from food safety issues to prevent animal intrusion into our leafy greens program is very, very important to us. And I can see where we're going to start utilizing technology like trail cams to try to see if animals are intruding into our spinach fields or our romaine heart fields or broccoli fields and things of that nature. And for that reason, if there's going to be specific exemptions spelled out in here, I would like to see that one added. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dane Bradfield, Lincoln County. Our recommendation was to go with the way the proposed regulation reads and also add a distance of 200 feet from a water source. We could not find a definition of water source in our notes that we submitted. We had that a water source would include isolated springs, guzzlers, and range improvements such as troughs, retention ponds, and all portions of service pipelines to those areas. First off, I want to say that we know that this is not a problem in all of the state, but it is a problem in Lincoln County, and specifically in Unit 241, 242, those areas. There's big animals there, deer and some elk moving in, and there's lots of cameras. 22 recorded on one water hole at one time.
We had a member come to our CAB meeting. His name is John Sanders. He's the manager of the Delmar Cattle Company. He's one of the men who runs his cattle in some of the areas of Unit 241, the group of 240, or 24, as we refer to it. Some of these places he has to haul water into because it's so arid, there's not a spring in the area. So he takes a water truck and he hauls water into these troughs. Well, everybody that comes out and sets a camera, they plant their own post to put their camera on. So his water holes would be surrounded by posts where he could not get his water truck in to fill up his water holes for his cows. And he said right out, he says, I have no problem with the trail cameras. It's not the trail camera's fault. It's unfortunately the 5 or 10% of the people that abuse it. And well, he used to take them down and take them to the sheriff's office, and whoever wanted to could claim them. But he says now, it got to be such a pain trying to fill up my water troughs. He says, I just run them over with my water truck. I don't know if I should have relayed that story or not on his part, but however, we do have a large problem like that. And whether it's an ethics thing or protecting wildlife, something's got to be done. Personally, I didn't expect to see regulation this quick, but it has kind of snowballed, and we've been talking about it for quite a while on issues like this. But we're happy to see it. We definitely support it. We have a problem. We can get documentation of things like this, and it sounds like we'll need to in this process so that other people can see the kind of things that are going on in areas like this. But we would like to see the inclusion of a distance from water included in the regulation to help with these problems. And Commissioner Bliss, I could be wrong, but it seems like a couple years, on your comment about the diverting wildlife, it seems like a couple years ago we adopted a regulation that included diverting or making diversions to funnel wildlife in different directions. I could be wrong on that, but just as my memory serves me. But anyway, that would be our recommendation, is to see regulation like this. Thank you.
Mr. Bunch.
Glenn Bunch, Mineral County. In our meeting, that was our main topic, was trail cameras. We have an organization that's newly formed in Mineral County. It's called the Mineral County Sportsmen. And they held a meeting about it, and they sent a letter. I don't know if you people got it or not. It was supposed to have been emailed to you. I put it in my packet so that Suzanne got it. Hopefully you guys got it. But the main thing is, it's been brought to the attention that over the last few months, the Nevada Department of Wildlife has been considering new regulations on trail cameras. At this time, the information has been presented to me by the Mineral County Advisory Board. Doesn't feel that it lacks. I don't feel that I can back a law that regulates the use of trail cameras, whether during hunting season or not. Would ask the Nevada Department of Wildlife to take a do-nothing approach as it pertains to trail cameras. I've always been in awe at the way of the Nevada Department of Wildlife using statistical data, scientific research to make its decision as it relates to all things that have to do with hunting and fishing, whether it's tag amounts, bag limits, or how many fish we take from streams and rivers. I'd be more open to the idea of regulation if there was some research to prove that the use of trail cameras was impacting harvest percentages or negatively impacting the conservation beliefs that we practice and teach. All that we have seen in one person's opinion, the letter that was a legitimate hunter is, personally I feel that the person who wrote the letter had a negative enough hunting experience to push a regulation. I feel that history shows that the regulating human behavior has never been a very good rate of success. Unfortunately, there will always be those who show a lack of consideration and ethical behavior towards their fellow hunters. Again, I would ask the Nevada Department of Wildlife to take a do-nothing approach on the regulation, the use of trail cameras, at least until research shows that they've been having a negative impact on conservation efforts being put forth by the Department of Wildlife. There was one thing that
Andy Stinson put out in the meeting, it was in the minutes, more rules don't solve problems. We can give more education on the ethical use of cameras through hunter education, and more education with ethics is a major portion. With that statement and the other letters that went on in the meeting, the board chose that we supported our sportsman representative at the meeting, and that the feelings of the president at the meeting, that they don't want it and it should go with the opinion of the public. The two letters submitted by the organization, Jeremy Williams and Andy Stintz of the Monroe County Sportsman Club, be included as an attachment, and that we recommend no trail camera regulation. While we're talking about that, Wednesday, I got this in the email from Cabela's. It's an attachment for your camera for a spotting scope, so you can stand on a hill, wherever, and take the same picture that the trail cameras are and sell them. Thank you.
Any other public comment? I'll bring it back to the commission.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I do have the information that
Oh.
Vice Chairman Drew asked for on Heritage. It was July 1st, except for turkey, which is the earliest season as set by the commission.
Okay, July 1st. Thank you. That was so long ago, I forgot we asked a question. Yeah, thank you. Anybody have any direction for Robb, or we just? Commissioner McBeath?
Rob, have you been in contact with the state of Montana, and could you relay any law enforcement issues that they've had in trying to, basically enforce their regulations or statute, whatever it is, in Montana? Is there a law enforcement nightmare, like some of the people have speculated?
For the record, Robb Buonamici. I even spoke with the chief from Montana at WAFA a month or so ago, and he said they issue, a handful of citations, maybe a dozen or so, statewide a year. They have pretty good compliance with it. He did comment that they got ahead of the curve and before trail cameras really became popular. So that made it real easy. They had a ton of sportsman support for it. And so as a result of that, a high compliance rate. And you had, just like we would have to do, because this is somewhat like Montana's, it's based on using them for the purpose of hunting. And so that's the element that we have to prove. Because you have a hunting license or a deer tag doesn't mean you're using it for that purpose. So it's incumbent upon us to prove that it was used for that purpose.
Commissioner McNish?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, listening to Dennis's concerns, there's certainly got to be a little room to work in Section 5, subsection A, AA that is, an employee or authorized agent of the state. I mean, there might be a little room to work for organizations that are doing conservation work, because certainly, that information's being passed on. It's not just for an organization's, for them to sit around and have a beer over there. They're using it for something, and it's probably to justify, doing something or coordination with the department. But I do agree with Brad's comments that Section 5, subsection B could probably come out. I think it's covered. It felt like some of the comments to me were really aimed at, that we're really restricting the use of these, but we're restricting it for hunting purposes during certain times of the year. So it's not even restricting it 100% over the course of the year. And I certainly don't see a problem with being a little proactive. The comment that Montana had been ahead of the game, so people hadn't really gotten used to it. Well, you could probably argue that there's people are pretty used to it in Nevada, and we're still a 50-50 split. So it's probably, it hasn't swayed everybody to stick with them either. So, I would like to see have a little more discussion or see a little bit of verbiage relative to the water. You know, I'm not sure where I stand on that quite yet. I do, it does concern me. The fair chase is the primary issue on the hunting stuff. I don't know exactly where I stand on the trail cameras around water. You know, wildlife does deserve a little bit of a break somewhere along the way.
Any other commission comments?
Yeah, I got one.
Commissioner Young?
I heard several people talk about law enforcement nightmare. You know, I got a lot of respect for Chief Buonamici. I think he's been doing this 32 years, and he doesn't feel it's a law enforcement nightmare. I think I was a sheriff here and did a lot of law enforcement work in 30 years here, and I see this as a very minor type of law enforcement issue as far as enforcement. And I'll tell you why. It goes right back to what the gentleman from Lincoln County said. This law's, the potential for this regulation is designed for the abuser. And I think the Montana experience explains it explicitly. Probably 1 or 2% of the potential hunters in the field would ever think of breaking the law. And it's the specific thing that's so flabbergasting that occurs in like Area 241, 231, 221, where you got these trophy hunters that are taking advantage of technology that, and it is a fair chase issue, and it's not right. And that's what law enforcement does, is it should be able to surgically, at the will of the people, and through a process such as this, be able to prevent somebody that is that unethical from abusing a privilege that we all value, and that's hunting, and hunting correctly and hunting fairly. And I think that's all we're trying to accomplish here with Robb's proposal.
Anybody else? Okay. Move on to the next one unless somebody has something else. Unless you want to make a motion, or I don't know if there's a motion to be made or direction. Go ahead, Mr. Drew.
Well, I'll try this and see where it goes. So I would be willing to make a motion to provide staff direction to forward the proposed regulation to LCB with the following changes. That we strike beginning 30 days before a big game season and make that August 1st through December 31st. Strike section 3. Develop an exemption in section 5A for conducting research or monitoring in a manner that does not aid hunting. That's it.
I'll second for purposes of discussion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Commissioner Wallace.
Jeremy, did you include crops in that last section down there? Did I miss that, or?
I did not, but if you have an amendment, I'd be willing to entertain it.
You want me to move that, or are you willing to?
Yeah, give me what you're thinking, and I'm willing to make that
I
affirmative.
think going along with what Brad brought up there, that purposes of livestock production, livestock or crop production. Protection, I'm sorry.
Okay, I would include that in my original motion.
I would second that.
Commissioner McBeath.
Would you consider adding the additional restriction on water sources?
I would not at this time.
Okay, any further discussion? Commissioner Bliss.
The only concern I have is that actually, if you go from, well, I guess it's just for hunting, for hunting purposes. So if, for example, if someone had a archery bull out tag, they harvested their bull, they couldn't use a camera from August 1st on, then they harvested bull. After the time that they don't actually have a tag anymore, would that person be able to put cameras out then? Because it's actually not for the purpose of them hunting?
I'm in a gray area there because we all know that one guy puts the camera out and probably 10 guys get the picture out of it between stealing the camera and stealing the card and downloading the card. How many people download the same? I mean, a lot of guys take their laptop with them and they find a camera and they just download the card, put card back in, say thank you. They saved the money of the card.
Yeah, no, I know a couple that steal them too. So.
Yeah. So,
So, it's just a question. I mean,
all right. We have a motion, second. Any further discussion? Commissioner McBeath.
I may not get a second, but I'm going to make a motion to amend the motion to add an exemption for water sources. I just need to know where the rest of the commission stands on this. So I'll make that motion, see what happens.
Can we keep it, well, can we keep it cleaner, take a vote on that, and then we can come back to that? Yes. Okay.
I'll withdraw the motion.
Let's take a vote on the original motion unless somebody else has anything else to say. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion passed unanimous. Go ahead, Mr. McBeath.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to add an additional exemption, an additional requirement in the regulation that there be no trail camera use during any time period within 200 feet. I think it's 200 feet or 200 yards. 200 feet. 200 feet of a water source.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We have Commissioner Bliss, Commissioner Wallace opposed, and Commissioner Drew opposed. Okay. All right, so now there's some direction. Anything else on agenda item number 12 before we close it and move on to 13? Okay, let's move on to 13, bear management for possible action. Commissioner McNinch and I have been working on letters, getting them ready to go to the appropriate people. In the meantime, some other developments come up that make the letter that we've prepared not timely, but we have been working with people from Incline Village General Improvement District, Washoe County. I've had discussions with a few commissioners, and I think we're getting some movement on this topic without a letter at this point, but we're prepared to keep a letter going forward throughout the process. I believe the authority to do the letter didn't say we had to do it right then. I think we're going to pick the appropriate time that we need that letter to go forward, and we will at that point, but I think we're getting some traction going forward. Mr. McNinch?
Yeah, and I would just add, for those of you who haven't kept pace, Washoe County Commission basically punted to the Incline Village General Improvement District. They're the ones that have the franchise agreement with the Waste Management Company. Franchise agreements when it comes to waste management are intensely complex, and IVGID holds that franchise agreement with Waste Management in the Incline Village area. So there was a question of authority for Washoe County in the Incline Village area. So they wanted to hold off on taking any action until this was vetted out at the level where that authority existed. And IVGID's taking that up. There is a meeting this next Wednesday, the 25th, 6 o'clock in Incline Village. It's an IVGID board meeting, trustee meeting, and they will be taking the issue up of considering modifications to that franchise agreement. Opening a franchise agreement's not always easy. It takes an act of Congress sometimes, so if Waste Management isn't real happy about it, it might not be something that gets open. I'm not sure how it all lays out, but the bottom line is that there is some steam for it. Pursuant to the board action from the last two meetings, it would be my intent, unless directed otherwise, to modify that letter ever so slightly as per our approval and submit it at the IVGID board meeting. That one would be more timely at this point. It would be more specific to that particular process in support of adopting provisions, bear-resistant container provisions into their franchise agreement. And then from there, it'll blossom out. There's more discussion that needs to occur at the county commission level. Washoe County Health District has regulations pertinent to other areas of bear concern, Verdi area, the Galena area, Collin Ranch area. So there's still some issues that need to kind of fall out in that area, but there is some energy. There are certainly certain levels of support, and think we might actually be getting some traction here. And I know that there are members of the IVGID that are supportive of it. I know that. So, if anybody has any questions or direction or comments?
Commissioner Drew?
Yeah, I think the motion we made, if I remember right, is probably broad enough to allow that, but I'd be willing to make a motion after public comment to support Commissioner McNinch and maybe Commissioner Robb, if you're in town, to attend that meeting and convey our support for looking at mandatory containers.
Okay.
That would be good.
It is an action item. Let's go to public comment. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for a motion.
So I would move to approve that Commissioner Robb and McNinch draft a letter on behalf of the commission for IVGID, Incline Village General Improvement District, to consider mandatory bear-proof trash containers and to present that at their meeting on Wednesday.
Yeah, I'll second that.
We have a motion,
It's
a second.
appropriate for me
Any
to-
further discussion?
And just in terms of discussion, that would be in addition to what I think this body has already authorized you guys to do in terms of interactions with the county commissions.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passed unanimous. We're moving on to 14, Cummins Lake, for possible action. The commission been requested by White Pine County to support the restoration of Cummins Lake. Commissioner Drew.
Yeah, this one was at my request. If you remember our meeting in Ely, several folks had talked in support of kind of a larger project to try and restore Cummins Lake both as a fishery and kind of a recreational area. I was contacted subsequent to that by both their economic development officer and one of their past cab members, and they both asked if we wouldn't consider writing a letter of support for those efforts. And so I offered that I would put it on the agenda, and I'd be more than happy to draft something on behalf of the commission.
All right. Any public comment on that? Mr. Volz?
For the record, Fred Volz. I was present at that Ely meeting and heard what the economic development manager had to say about the project. Spending other people's money is a really serious responsibility that many times public entities do not take seriously, unfortunately. This seems to be the case in Ely and White Pine County. Yes, they're hurting economically, but to spend $30 to $42 million to try and remediate a lake that is laced with mercury, it's very hard to remediate, really seems like a colossal waste of the taxpayers' money. If it's about recreational opportunities, economic development, that money from the federal taxpayers could be spent much more wisely. I would strongly encourage the board not to submit a letter of support. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Rex?
Rex Flowers, Washoe County. Our board would request that you fully support a letter supporting the Lincoln Ad Hoc Committee. It's not about spending money, it's about affording opportunity to all individuals that live over there for further recreational uses. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for a motion. Commissioner McNinch, you got a motion?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. And the reason why I'm making the motion is, you know, we talk about lead in the environment and shooting lead bullets and things of that nature, and mercury's the same concept. It's in that same group of stuff that, you know, there's public health ramifications and environmental ramifications, and you know, it's a wrong that we committed long ago, and I'm okay with supporting cleaning it up. I understand the cost. It's horribly expensive, and wish we could have prevented it. But anyway, I'd make a motion to authorize Commissioner Drew to draft a letter in support of White Pine County's efforts to restore Cummins Lake.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passed unanimous. Item 15. You brought your Cliff Notes version.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm Laura Richards, the Chief of Wildlife Diversity Division. I'm bringing CGR 426 LCB file number R004-13. This was a temporary regulation that we brought before the commission back in March at the Reno meeting. Because that was during the legislative session, we need to come back to you so we can bring this forward as a permanent regulation. So the regulation is the same format that was provided back in March. If you take a look at the regulation, Section 1, except as otherwise provided in subsection 2, a person shall not hunt or take any wildlife which is classified as protected or possess any part thereof without first obtaining the appropriate license, permit, or written authorization from the department. It goes on to, such a license, permit, or authorization is not required for the possession of a desert tortoise, which was held in captivity on or before August 4th, 1989, which was when the desert tortoise was listed as threatened, or is acquired through an adoption program in the new language, or another method approved by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The official adoption group right now is the tortoise group down here in Las Vegas. We also just recently heard that the tortoise group in Reno has been given permission as an official adoption program through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. That term or another method also allowed the ability to establish an online registration service that the tortoise group has established so that you can adopt or gift a tortoise to another person. So that has been a really good program to facilitate allowing desert tortoises to be gifted to other folks. The amendment is a first step to reduce overbreeding of pet tortoises. In the past, there's been about 1,000 unwanted pet tortoises that have been turned in southern Nevada. And this was a pickup service provided by the San Diego Zoo several years ago when there was about 1,000 coming in each year. Last year, that service was no longer available, and the public was asked to bring any unwanted pet tortoises to the Animal Foundation. And the Animal Foundation, or lead shelter here in Las Vegas, continues to accept unwanted pet tortoises. Again, this regulation will not affect those people that possess a desert tortoise before that date of May 1st, 2013. It'll only affect those people that acquire a tortoise after that date. The online registration program is working very well. We're working very closely as part of the Pet Tortoise Working Group that includes the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Bureau of Land Management, San Diego Zoo, Clark County, and also the Tortoise Group to look at ways to keep those numbers down. As of last year, when the pickup service was discontinued and the public was required to bring them to the Animal Foundation, the numbers dropped to about 500 that were turned in. This year so far, we have 248 that have been turned in, and hopefully those numbers really drop off as we go into the fall. But all those different partners are working very well together to keep those numbers as low as possible. We're looking at translocation of those tortoises that are healthy enough back into the wild, but of course they have to be screened to make sure they don't have diseases and that the area that they're suited for out in the habitats. We're also looking at fostering and possibly working with the prisons down here in Las Vegas to set up some fostering programs, working with local veterinarians to look at some different possibilities for sterilization of these tortoises, and there's a technique that's been developed that will be available to local veterinarians to assist with that. So in your package, you also have a letter from Clark County that was written to Director Wasley supporting this regulation. Again, this is a permanent regulation now that we're bringing forward. The regulation is also supported by the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Tortoise Group and other partners that are working, trying to keep these numbers down as low as possible. So I'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll hear it again tomorrow.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We're moving on to agenda item number 16, Commission General Regulation 424, Transportation Permit. Robb?
For the record, Robb, Buonamici, Chief Game Warden. This regulation is similar to the one Laura just presented in the respect it's a temporary regulation. And most of you that received big game tags this year will notice there's a little difference in the formatting of them. The transportation permit is incorporated as part of the big game tag. So that's what this regulation has done for us. So I will just kind of go through it. You'll notice if you had the temporary regulation and this regulation side by side, you would see initially what appears to be a substantial difference. Because of the formatting, LCB went through the temporary and basically reformatted the whole thing, but it says the same thing, just in a different way. So that being said, Section 1, a person may use his or her game tag as a transportation permit. So that's the difference you see in the tags this year. And then 1A, and I'm just hitting the highlights. The game tag includes the signature of the holder of the game tag and the date on which and time at which the holder signed the tag. So that's something new to our sportsmen, our hunters out there, is a requirement to sign the tag this year. We quite honestly have most the resident hunters we've contacted do not have their tag signed because it's something new. There haven't been any citations issued that I'm aware of. We've been in a strictly warning mode this year, not even a warning, just education. Hey, by the way, did you notice we changed the format of the tag and you need to sign it? And coincidentally, most of the residents had signed their tags that we contact in the field, or non-residents, excuse me. And then 1B, the game tag has been validated. That's a requirement before you can use a transportation permit. You have to have obviously killed something and punched your tag and attached it to the carcass. In Section 1, number 2, the holder of the game tag, the person who will transport the carcass, hide, or pelt of the animal, and the witness each shall at the time the carcass, hide, or pelt is transferred from the holder of the big game tag to the person who will transport the carcass, hide, or pelt. They sign their respective portions of the tag with date and time, and so that's what Section 2 addresses. And then Section 3 has a requirement for the holder of the tag. If the holder of the tag, person who will transport the carcass, hide, or pelt of the animal, or the witness does not have a driver's license or any other identification card issued by a governmental agency, he or she may include the date of birth in those portions. So you'll see on our new tags, there's a spot for that. And then number 4, the tag must include the destination of the carcass of the animal, where it's going. And number 5 addresses that if it's falsely filled out, it's under penalties of perjury. And number 6, that the tag shall not be removed from the carcass until the pelt has been transferred, or carcass has been transferred to the holder, from the holder of the game tag to the person who transports the tag. And then number 7, a person who transports the tag and the holder must retain their portions for a year, up to a year. And the reason for that is statute of limitations is a year on a misdemeanor. And then section 2, A, include in the space provided on the tag or permit the signature of the holder on the tag or permit and the date on which the time at which the holder signed the tag or permit. And then there's certain portions of the old regulation that are deleted, so it's in compliance with the new language. So that's it in a nutshell. The whole idea was to make it easier for the sportsman to have another individual transport their animal without having to track down a game warden or a license agent to get a transportation permit. So any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Any questions of Commissioner Bliss?
I got 2, Rob. In number 7, where it has, I understand now why you have it for a year, that they have to keep the transportation permit. Is there a way that they could submit like a return card to the department to where you had that return card? So if someone, I'm pretty good at losing stuff. And so
So are
I
we.
didn't know.
No, I think, seriously, I think that would create additional, quite a bit of extra work on our part as opposed to the individual hunters and transporters keeping their portion. And where we'd come up with the additional time, what we'd give up, we'd have to give something up to accommodate that. And we could explore that a little for the future with the license office, but maybe there is a way to do it.
Yeah, I don't know.
But off
It's
the
just-
top of my head, I'm just thinking it's going to be quite a bit of extra work.
Okay. And then on number 8, where it says the last sentence, hide or pelt until the carcass, hide or pelt is frozen, smoked, dried, consumed. I'm just going to reference the Nevada Outdoorsman Wheelchairs hunt that we do. And we use the transportation permit, and it is actually worked really well this year. But sometimes what happens is if you have a taxidermist, say in Elko, and the meat processors in Reno that we use, and you can't keep everything in contact to, if the hide goes to the taxidermist and the carcass is actually going to a processing plant, we'd almost have to, the way this is, we'd have to take everything to the processing plant, put it in there, and then bring the hide back somewhere to a taxidermist. And the reason I'm talking about that is because a lot of times the taxidermists will donate the mounts to the hunters, for no charge or anything, and so.
We have retained the taxidermy portion of the tag. That's still there.
Okay,
So
but
you can get, the hide or whatever, the head to the taxidermist.
okay, maybe I misunderstand this, and I knew we could use the taxidermy slip to get the head and hide to the taxidermist, but I thought the way this read is it all had to be attached till it
Then
got to the
yeah.
processing plant.
If you go to section 3 on the next page. That addresses the taxidermy stub, so that language is pretty much as is.
Commissioner Drew, did you have a comment? Like,
I actually have the same exact two questions, and then the other question was on process. So I think I'm where Chad is. If you're gonna transport, you have to have the meat and the hide, correct?
Right, if I'm using the transportation permit portion of the tag, it's all gotta be kept together.
Right.
And then, say you authorize me to take it to Jack Robb's house. And then Jack Robb wants to take the head to the taxidermist for you. Then the taxidermist portion comes into play.
But there's no means by which you could separate the two until you're at the processing, if I'm reading this right,
Yeah,
as a transporter.
Right.
That was the one question I had.
Yeah, they have to stay together.
And then the other question I had on 7, how critical is it from the enforcement standpoint to hold that document for a year?
It's not extremely critical. Quite honestly, it was added as an aid to enforcement, because we often get calls, Operation Game Thief calls, months after the incident. Hey, you might want to look at so-and-so. He really didn't kill his deer. His buddy killed his deer, and they used the transportation portion to cover the illegal killing of that deer. So it's not, we're going to have to investigate it and go, it's going to be a thorough investigation anyway. So it's not critical, and that's where it would be nice to, mail it in or what have you. But I'm not sure it's worth the effort.
And then I guess the process question I had is I remember when we talked about setting this as a temporary rig, that there was some advantage in trying to get through this year as a temporary to see how it all worked, and then if we had to make adjustments, we could for the permanent. So the question becomes, when does the temporary run out?
November 1st.
Okay. So if we don't have this in place,
Then our tag,
then everything becomes.
we have to redo our tags.
Right.
That's it.
Okay.
Not only do we have to redo our tags, but the tags that are out there don't work the way we wanted them to, because we have tags
Right.
printed this way now. Any other questions? Seeing none, with this being a workshop, we're not going to take public comment. We're going to move on to the next one. Public comment will be provided at the end during general public comment. Tomorrow, we'll have public comment on the agenda items when they're an action item. So let's move on to the next one, Rob.
The next one is LCB file number R018-13. That one addresses, pertains to trapping. And it's pretty short and sweet. It's to address the provisions of Senate Bill 213 that require the commission to consider visitation periods. And with regards to that, Section 2, that was a controversial section at the Fallon Commission meeting workshop where this was workshopped. And so the druthers of probably most of the people there, a lot of the people there, was to omit Section 2. But Section 2 basically was there to provide a definition of visitation, to clarify, from our perspective, ambiguities that have existed for years and years between judges, district attorneys, game wardens, trappers, so forth, just what constitutes visitation. So I'm sure you'll hear a lot of comments on that at the appropriate time. Section 3 basically makes the 96-hour visitation requirement statewide. And again, keeping in mind that the direction from the commission was to get something in place before the trapping season and provide a little time to really thoroughly explore the trapping visitation as it relates to proximity to populated areas. And there's a trapping committee meeting tomorrow evening to address that. So, any questions?
Commissioner Drew?
Yeah, just a little bit of a clarification on 19 on what we had discussed in Fallon. I don't know that we discussed omitting all of Section 2. I think what we had talked about is omitting the initial paragraph of Section 2, replacing that with the language in Section 3, and then leaving Sub 1 and Sub 2. So just a clarification on, I think, what got discussed there, if I remember that correctly.
The issue with that is LCB's insertion on Section 2 for the purposes of NRS 503.570. We never had that in the original, what we submitted. So LCB inserted that. So I think they're going to be reluctant to take it out.
Right, and I guess maybe I didn't explain that right. So what I remembered talking about in Fallon, on Section 2, we would basically remove that entire first paragraph. Section 3 would replace it, so it would read, a person who is required pursuant to visit, cause to be visit, et cetera, through 96 hours. And then 1, by a person who is a holder of a license issued by the department, and 2, in a manner which ensures that any, and I believe we replaced mammal with animal, caught in the trap, snare, or similar device. So I don't think it was just a straight omission, just to be clear, from what we discussed. And this is per my notes that I pulled out of the binder.
Yeah, that'll work.
So just so everyone's kind of on the same page, am I making that up, or do others'
No,
notes
that's
match
where
that?
we're at. Commissioner McBeath?
Was it going to be the intent of the trapping committee to visit that issue then and vet that, to
Yeah.
actually come up with a definition of visitation?
It would be more a function of whether we take action on this as part of this workshop, this process, because that's been part of the discussion here. If it's not taken up here, then certainly the committee could take a look at it if that's what needs to be done. I guess it's a function of what the board would like to do. Yay, nay, or somewhere in between.
And we can discuss this further tomorrow when we get to the action item, but, you know, when I see by a person who is which a holder of a trapping license and in a manner which ensures any mammal caught in the trap, snare, or similar device is removed from the trap, that tells you how they have to visit. They have to visit it in a way that they ensure that if there's an animal caught in it, it's removed. If they decide to flag or whatever they decide to do and use optics, and they mess up, he's got them. So they have to visit in a manner that they can remove a mammal if caught. And that's pretty clear to me that that's how, you know, if they mess up and don't visit in a way that they can tell if something's caught, Robb has them.
I'm not sure I follow that. Are you following that? Does that make sense to you?
I know what he's saying, but I don't totally agree.
Let me ask this question. With that kind of an interpretation, the statute is attempting to regulate the conduct of going to visit the trap within a 96-hour period. irrespective if there's anything in it. Am I correct or am I not correct on that?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Then that would, doesn't that require that the person be at the trap location? Or does that leave it open? I guess the disconnect I'm having is, how are we gonna know that somebody has visited the trap in a manner which ensures that the mammal caught in the trap, snare, or similar device is removed from the trap, snare, or similar device? How we do that?
You're bringing up the same legal dilemma that the prosecutors bring up with us and the judges. That's why we tried to, our intent was, we don't care what the definition of visitation is. Just that there's some type of definition that clarifies that in a manner, you can make an argument that, well, had I had an animal there, I would have known there was an animal there, and we couldn't refute it. I could be on the mountain 2 miles away with the spotting scope or what have you. So that's all we were trying to do, is clarify it. If we want to allow checking a trap with spotting scopes at 2 miles away, we don't care. Then it's enforceable. The way it is now, the only time it's really truly enforceable is when there's an animal in the trap.
For 96 hours.
Yeah,
For 96 hours. but
correct.
We don't know how long before the animal was caught in the trap, or it's actually from the time you see the animal in the trap, when you start counting. We don't know how long the trap had been visited before that, right?
Right.
I'm not sure I fully understand the position that the trappers and this explanation that's been given by Commissioner Drew and Commissioner Robb. But I will make this statement, that I think, and maybe it's a pun, but optically, the perception that if we go down this route and we allow an interpretation that traps be checked by optics, by binoculars or spotting scopes, I will bet that we will be back in the legislature dealing with this issue again, because they will take it, because I really think that the public, the general public, not even the anti-trappers and the anti-hunters, are going to have a real hard time with that. And the way that this has come down in these meetings, and the position that the trappers have put forth, that they should be able to check with optics, I think that's problematic to this commission. It's going to make us look not good. And from a policy standpoint, I don't think it's the right direction we should be going. And we should be very specific as to what a visitation of a trap is. That's what my concern is that we will be most certainly back at the legislature, because an interpretation that allows the use of spotting scopes and any kind of optics is unreasonable. And I want to, for the record, just state that I have talked to 3 trappers, and all 3 of them have stated that you cannot determine that a bobcat is in a trap unless you go there and visit, and even then, it's very difficult. And that's 3 trappers, independent of Mr. Sullivan, who in the Clark County CAB meeting made the same statement. So I am very, concerned that we would take this language out, and I'd like to see it stay in.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, We don't have our DAG here to keep me in line, and good thing Commissioner Drew reads better than I do. The way that that all these workshops are agendized, it says public comment allowed, which means we're going to take public comment on this, item 17. And when we close item number 17, we're going to go back up and see if there's any public comment on item 15 and item 16 so we can stay legal here. So any public comment on 17? Come on up, Dr. Moldy.
You know, you caught me by 17, what we just finished talking about,
Yeah, 17.
the wording of visitation.
Yes.
Commissioner McBeath is exactly correct again. Can't believe I'm complimenting him so much today. The department provided us with some non-target species caught by trappers accidentally, if you will, over 8 years out of the last 12. And I think this bears directly on whether it's advisable that somebody should go up and walk and look at a trap and see what they have, or if they can look from a half a mile away with optics. About 20% of the trappers at most, during 8 of the 12 years of the last decade, reported the following non-target species caught by 20%. Who knows what 100% would have been. Here's a brief rundown. Rabbits, 4,190. Domestic dogs, 195. Domestic cats, 116. Mountain lions, 172, including 17 dead in the trap, apparently. Others, whatever that is, 183. Livestock, 25. Game animals, 33. I don't know what game animals. Badgers, bears, bobcats, chipmunks. A few of those. Ground squirrels, 193 pack rats. Even a pond turtle and a skunk. Also, golden eagles, 9. Hawks, 11. 1 owl. A great blue heron, chucker, 17 coots, 50 ducks, 5 geese, 97 magpies, 3 quail, 1 rail, for Christ's sake, 35 ravens. So this was the carnage that trappers reported catching by accident over that period of time. And I would suggest to you, some of these numbers are astonishing. And to say that trappers ought to be able to examine their traps from some distance away suggests, these numbers give me a lot of heartburn when they suggest that. It doesn't make sense because they would probably be overlooking much of this. So I think that the visitation has to include an on-site inspection. We'll talk more about these numbers tomorrow in the committee meeting. I've sent them to you all already, so you have them, and I have copies for the committee. These are astonishing numbers, and they directly bear on Commissioner McBeath's point. Thank you.
Ms. Swain?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I lost my yellow card, but I'll fill out another one. Regarding the visitation in person, I really want to thank Commissioner McBeath for his comments. I agree 100% with what he's saying. I certainly agree with the intention that Warden Buonamici had in writing Section 2 as it is, and I certainly hope that it is retained. I have some comments here that didn't get to you in time from one homeowner who had found traps all over her property, and one of the wardens came out who was very helpful to this homeowner and said that the trapper was going to watch his traps with a spotting scope. And the warden said there's no way the man could have seen anything from so far away. And then the warden said we require a real visit. And the neighbor's dog was caught in a trap, could not see the bobcat only a few feet away because the cat had climbed under some surrounding sagebrush. So again, there's some arguments here. And also an argument about the assistance that it would be to the game wardens to be able to have this visitation in person because this is a note I got from Tom Patton. Don't forget the needs of law enforcement, their ability to monitor questionable trapping without wasting lots of their time. Warden input should weigh heavily in both of these issues up for discussion. So there's just some of the arguments that I feel are in favor of in-person visitation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wright?
Jana Wright, for the record. I was pleased to see that Section 2 had reappeared in the reg that was going to be before the commission after listening to the tape about at the meeting at Fallon. Visitation is very, very important, and it has to be an in-person visitation, using scopes, binoculars, and as Commissioner McBeath said, John Sullivan in the Clark County Cab meeting, who traps bobcats, said, sometimes, even if you're up against them, you can't see them, which just was a big red flag to me that I just please ask this commission, please keep visitation on the table as part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
Jim Curran, speaking for myself and for the Churchill County Advisory Board. There are a lot of trappers other than just bobcat trappers, and that's all you seem to be visualizing on. There's one section of the old state regulation, NRS, that's been in existence since the 1950s, and that was an exemption for trappers who are using devices that are intended to cause immediate death. I mean, you have to look at what the intent is, and that is to remove a live animal. There's no actually need, and it's say for 60 years there's been exemption if you have a dead animal in the trap. If you caught a beaver, you caught a muskrat, you caught a mink, and they're dead, they're submerged, that's the way you've set it up, or you're using a device. It's been exempt. I've trapped muskrats all my life, and there you're trapping in a marsh situation where you have the potential for ice, severe ice, and to hold where you have a dead animal under the water. There is absolutely no reason to have a visitation. And again, the legislature back in the 1950s exempted it. It's in the regulation, or has been in the NRS until the legislature gave it to your responsibility, and I would hope, for some reason, Mr. Buonamici excluded that from this draft regulation you're looking at. There's beaver trappers that are controlling habitat damage all over the state, especially up in Elko County. You're going to put them out of business with that visitation. They're fighting deep snow, they're fighting ice, and there's absolutely, it's not a humane issue, it's not any issue if an animal is dead and he's underwater. And so I really would plead that you would consider adding to this regulation or any other draft the wordage that we have had for 60 years, that it has been adequate. I don't think there's many trappers, and everybody's talking about using binoculars. I myself have no idea. I hate gray areas. I did write that in an email to you fellows. And what does in person mean? Is that 30 feet, 50 feet? I mean, you're referring to using binoculars. I can check one of my traps at 50 feet. Is that adequate, or am I going to be concerned about being in violation? I mean, the wordage in this new proposed regulation is, to me, grayer than what the state law said for so many years that I believe 99% of the trappers knew.
Okay, thank you. Joel?
I want to get this thing right. Mr. McBeath, I take considerable offense to what you said. It's something that is obviously from someone that has never done this. You mentioned earlier in the Predator Management Committee about anecdotal information and studies, and yet you come on and say you've talked to 3 trappers and you've got anecdotal information. Isn't that what you just did? I'll leave that alone for now. We can discuss it some more later if you want. There's been considerable discussion and confusion on this issue. As Jim said, this has been done in previous legislatures. It's been heard in front of other commissions, and it's been summarily rejected. The arguments are there. The law has stood in place for 40 years. It's very clear, it's very concise, it serves the intent perfectly. I don't think the intent of the law is for us to worry about us checking empty traps. It's about us taking animals out of traps. The law says, check your traps and take the animals out. How clearer can you get than that? You can't. I don't think it's possible to craft a better law than the way it is right now. I've heard this for 10 years. I bet I've spent 100 hours talking to Robb and law enforcement with this over the years, and I have not heard a thing that is any better than what we have right now. It specifies a certain action. It specifies a certain time frame. I mean, I don't think you can get better than that. If you don't take your animal out of your trap, you're busted. Write us a ticket, take us to jail, do whatever you got to do. The law is there. It's like a lot of these gun control laws. You know, there's a law that says you can't kill people. You know, why do we need another law on it? Once you start changing this, you're going to go down a whole lot of different roads. None of them are good. One of the things that I'm going to start saying a lot anymore is what exactly are we trying to accomplish? And let's quantify things. You know, I mean, this is kind of looking like there's 10,000 violations going on here. In the last 3 years, there's been 15 tickets given for this. Not 1,500 or 15,000 or even, you know, 20. There's been 15 tickets in 3 years. Let's quantify this. Are we having witch hunts? Well, what I would like to see, the Nevada Trappers Association, we think that NRS 503.570, subsection A and subsection B, or is it 1 and 2, whatever it is, we would like to see that just changed into NAC with no changes whatsoever. And that's, in a nutshell, what we would like to see happen.
Okay. Any other?
Thank you.
Come on up, Rex.
Rex Flowers, Washoe County. Joel was at our meeting. We listened to his argument. SB 213 is about visitation, time visitation, not the method. We support him, and that was the motion that we passed, is to recommend that you follow NRS 503.570 and use that as your structure for the NAC. Just keep the wording exactly the same. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Mike Reese, President of Southern Nevada Coalition for Wildlife. I got to tell you, I attended or video conferenced almost every hearing on SB 213. It said address the visitation time, a time frame. It didn't say how to do it. All it said is when. I don't know if we're losing sight of that, but That's what the legislature has directed us to do, is do we do it 96 hours? Or is there a different time that needs to be in? I'd have to concur with President of the Trappers Association, Mr. Joel Blakesley, that we're innocent until proven guilty. If there's an animal caught in that trap, take it out. I think it's very simple. NRS did that. I'm not a trapper, never have been, but as I sit back and look at that, I'm like, well, how much easier can you make it? We had one gentleman, trapper, at the cab meeting said, let me tell you what's happened to me. I caught an animal when I put my trap in. I took it out and I went back home and I caught another one. I come back out the next day, I took it out and I caught another one. He was fortunate enough to catch 3 animals in 3 days. However, if law enforcement or something drove by there for 3 days, he'd say, that same animal's been there for 3 days. I never even thought of that until he said it. But it's simple. When he arrived at the trap, he had one in it, he took it out. Let's keep it simple. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Mr. Volz?
For the record, Fred Volz, and I think we're losing sight of something here. This is a hidden lethal weapon. It inflicts death and serious injury on wildlife that have no way of escaping from it. To expect that there should be a lower standard for trappers to do what they're doing is completely irresponsible. It is not a fair chase situation, and it really should not be perpetuated. It's just the folly of this argument. The last gentleman mentioning about not being able to identify 3 different animals 3 different days. Animals don't look that much alike. You would be able to somehow discern that it's different one from another, whether it's by color or size or some other metric. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Drew.
Unless there's more discussion by the commission on 17, I would move to suspend the rules to allow us to go back to agenda item 15 and 16 to take public comment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're going back to agenda item 15. Is there any public comment on 15? Seeing none, we're moving on to agenda item 16. Is there any public comment on agenda item 16, transportation permit? Seeing none, we're moving on to agenda item number 18. And Rob, you just hit the highlights on this one. We bit this up for 3 hours and
For the record,
Fallon.
Robb Buonamici, Chief Game Warden. This regulation requires registration number be stamped on a tag or stamped on the trap. And that summarizes that one.
Questions from the commission? Or comments? Seeing none, public comment on number 18.
Rex Flowers, representing Washoe County Advisory Board. Under Section 4, we would like to see the word rodents deleted so that it does not apply to persons trapping for protection of their property. It's not always a rodent that is the issue. We also felt there should be a Section 6 that would say legally set traps would not be disturbed by law enforcement. A Section 7 that would say traps in transit would be exempt from this regulation. So in other words, only traps that are in use have to fall under this regulation. We would also ask the department to ask for a directive to the department that in this coming season, that citations may be issued for educational purposes, but there would be no punitive action, including demerits or fines, until after September 30th, 2014. That would allow 1 year for everybody to get in place. Thank you.
Additional public comment on 18?
Jim Curran, Churchill County Advisory Board. Besides what was just mentioned, the grace period, Churchill County Advisory Board recommended the regulation itself basically covers most of the areas, but it does not address several very common activities, and that is, one is where you loan a trap to someone, you sell a trap to someone, what the procedures are going to be, or if you're trapping in a partnership, do we put 2 tags on, do we put 1 tag on, which tag has precedent over the other. I myself, I loan my grandkids, I loan my great-grandkids little muskrat traps. Do they have to put numbers on? I have to take mine off. It's a procedural aspect that I know the trappers and the members at our county game board that had just a big question mark. Some of this addresses just the legal ramifications, but it doesn't cover really what happens out in true life, and especially the partnership and just loaning traps, which is very common among trappers. As long as there's a legal tag on there, just like your car registration, you don't change license plates based on the driver. You know, it's registered, it's registered. So I would definitely like the department and the commission to address or consider those points. Thank you.
Joe Krim, Persian Cab. The only concern that we had with this regulation is the time period. It's 2 weeks until the start of trapping season, so we'd like to see the implementation of this regulation not go into effect until next year's trapping season because of the time frame. There's no way that guys would be able to get the tags, get them ordered and get them on their traps before the start of season in 2 weeks.
Dane Bradfield, Lincoln County. Just 2 items that we had on this topic. One would be for a while now, trap registration has been optional to get a trapping number. And and probably Mr. Blakesley can clarify me on this, but they were told that those registrations would be good for lifetime. We want to make sure that those numbers could be included. They wouldn't have to get a new number, re-stamp all their traps. We'd just like to see clarification on that. And the other item goes similar to the last gentleman, where the way it reads right now, my understanding that only the person with that trap number on their license could legally check that trap. And in Lincoln County, I know we have a lot of people that trap in a partnership, or perhaps if somebody gets ill, they're asked somebody else to go check their traps to make sure it gets checked in the 96-hour time frame, to make sure that when people are doing that they're not breaking the law by having a different trap number on their license than the actual trap that they're checking.
Anybody else? Joe?
For the record, Joe Blakesley, President of Nevada Trappers Association. I think the markup as it is pretty good.
there's a part in there about, that has a rodent in there, and that was designed to exempt people that are trapping mice and rats and stuff like that. But there are other animals that we trap, like pigeons and things like that, so rodent is not a good word in there. So I'd like you to have that out of there. And basically, the way that reads now is you don't need to have a registration number on private property, the way I see it. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that's probably a good idea. If it's on private property, why do you need a number? This isn't a good law. I've said that before. So let's pass it with a minimum of fuss, and we'll deal with it and spray deodorant on it every time we get a chance. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Any commission comment? Seeing none, we're close. Oh, Commissioner Bliss.
I had the same concerns as a couple of these gentlemen as far as the partnership trapping. How are we going to address that? Is there some documentation that can be signed by two parties? Or, I guess you have any answers for that, Rob?
For the record, Robb Buonamici. Let's not forget that this is based on SB 213, which is now law. And so there's a couple of issues that we cannot, NAC cannot conflict with NRS. So that being said, to address the use of traps by another person, there's a section, it's section 3, number 3. It is unlawful for a person to whom a trap, snare, or similar device is registered to allow another person to possess or use the trap, snare, or similar device without providing to that person written authorization to possess, use, trap, or use the trap, snare, or other similar device. So all they need is written authorization, and that's already in statute. And then with regards to the lethal traps that cause immediate death, we don't need to put that in NAC. That's already in NRS. It's here somewhere. A person taking or causing to be taken wild mammals by means of trap, snares, or similar device which do not or are not designed to cause immediate death to the animals shall, if the trap, snare, or similar devices are placed or set to take mammals, visit or cause to be visited each trap, snare, or similar device. So conibears, traps that are designed to cause immediate death are already exempt by statute. So we can't non-exempt, we can't require a 96-hour visitation for those, because that'd be in conflict with NRS. So I just wanted to clarify what's already in statute.
All right, any other questions from the commission? Seeing none, we'll close agenda item number 18, move on to agenda item number 19, public comment period.
The record, Fred Volz. I have three things I'd like to bring up quickly. The first one is I'd like to, as it's been already stated, go in strong opposition to the lack of representation on the Wildlife Damage Management Committee and the trapping committees for anybody who isn't a wildlife killer, who is a public representative, non-commissioner, non-cab member. It's totally inappropriate to have a deliberative body that doesn't represent all perspectives, and this is a glaring omission that really needs to be corrected, Mr. Chairman. Secondly, a year ago in this room, we were talking about video conferencing. Apparently, we are no further along in that process. 1 year later, 4 months after the legislature appropriated the money, there's been no interim solution. We have nothing. It's ridiculous. The management on this subject has been very poor with 2 deputy directors in this department. This should have been done a long time ago, and it really needs to be made a priority and task by this commission to staff. And finally, the survey that was discussed last meeting in Fallon is another problem. Commissioner McNinch mentioned that there would be $25,000 to $40,000 spent to survey hunters using Idaho and a university there to conduct such a study to measure whatever. If there's that money available, in fact, it would be much more appropriate to be surveying the whole state to figure out what they do want done with their wildlife, because the commission is not supposed to be running a private hunting club. They are supposed to be running and managing the wildlife of this state and protecting them for everybody in the state, not just for a small group of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we're in recess till tomorrow morning at 8:30. Before everybody gets up, tag allocation committee meeting. Supposed to start at 5 o'clock. It is 7:45. Is anybody here specifically for the tag allocation committee meeting? Do you have a dying desire to stay here for the tag allocation committee meeting, or? But if we did not hold that meeting this evening, would that break your heart, and would you just? I have a wife that is sitting in the audience I haven't seen for 2 weeks, so I don't think we're going to have a meeting if everybody agrees with that. All right. We're done with the tag allocation committee meeting, too. Thank you, guys. That was the fastest tag allocation meeting.